Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool.
You know, I was watching the kids shoot their bows, right?
Yeah.
You know how we used to, have Nerf gun wars and we'd, catch the bullets out of the air? I think the arrows move slower than the Nerf bullets.
They do. The Nerf arrows you could definitely catch.
No. I mean, the real arrows the kids are using at archery.
Oh.
I think those move slower than the Nerf guns.
Are they using really low pound bows?
They're using 20-pound bows.
Oh, okay.
But
Very low.
Yeah, but arrows aren't that fast either, really.
Yeah.
Like 20 isn't super low. It's low, but it's not crazy low. But it's I could catch an arrow. You can if you can follow the flight path of the arrow, you can catch it, right? Because the Nerf guns, they move so fast you can't see them. You have to anticipate, right?
Yeah.
You have to, their finger's going, so it'll be here. Right? It's kind of like badminton or air hockey, where you have to plan ahead of time. So even a 40-pound bow, you could probably catch if you were...
Well, Mythbusters did that, didn't they?
Yeah, they had these master of martial arts guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's... I'm not saying that humans can catch arrows. I'm saying I can catch arrows.
The funny thing on that, I've been playing Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Yeah.
I think you'd really like the game.
The second game or the first?
First one. Second one's not out.
Because I watched, the archery and the lockpicking and it looks terrible. And there's the start of it is 4 hours of videos and story and stuff.
But the armor is breakable.
Ooh. But no, I don't think I'd like it because it's easier to do archery and lockpicking in real life.
Well, so, not only that, I put on a suit of armor.
Yeah.
So, I went back to an area that's meant to be crawling with bandits.
Yeah.
And there was a mace skirmish going on between bandits and soldiers. So I ran away with Henry and hid in the woods. And I waited and eventually the bandits walk up. And I went and scavenged the corpses, and I got a huge, mid-game armor.
Yeah.
And it was really heavy, I was overburdened, and it was all damaged. So I spent about half an hour walking back to a blacksmith, and slowly sold off pieces and repaired stuff, exchanging money, until I had, the best set of armor I could get that I could wear without being overburdened, and I had the best sword I could use. I had the best sword of the lot.
Yeah.
And the best bow. And then I was I'm going to practice firing an arrow, and Henry pulls back the bow, and goes, boo, and, lands 2 feet from him. It's Henry's not good enough at this. It's okay. And then this group of 3 bandits come at me. It's time to fight. So he puts down his helmet visor, pulls out a sword, and says, Henry's not very good at using this gear, so he's going to be worse at it. Okay. And I'm fighting these 3 guys, and they can't hurt me because I'm in really heavy armor. But I swing the sword twice, and then my guy's tired. I'm a better sword fighter than this man. In real life, if I was to wear that amount of armor and have that sword, I would win this fight against these 3 guys. And
to be fair, on the point of archery, right?
Yeah.
Old bows were way worse.
Yes.
It was much harder to shoot with.
Yeah.
And on that same note, you're used to wearing 18th century armor. He's wearing 13th century armor.
I was wearing 16th century, actually.
Oh, when you were doing this stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but still, your stuff's going to be lighter. It's going to be stronger.
Yeah.
But
even when he's not armored and using the sword,
yeah,
I think I'm a better sword fighter than him. And it's weird in a video game. That's I think I'd be better at this outside the video game than in it.
Yeah. But the lockpicking, the locks were worse back then too.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for that one.
Yeah.
And I would
the lockpicking is a timing base. It's you have to line thing up and then spin it while holding your mouse in place.
Yeah. But a medieval lock,
yeah,
easiest thing in the world to pick.
Definitely.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there was some good Swiss locks or something, but
yeah, the security for locks then was the weight of the pins and the smallness of the hole while still being strong enough to turn it.
Yeah.
So part of it was actually having keys made out of strongest materials to turn it was a big
so your
deal.
Picks could actually break possibly.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of the basis for the locks.
And I imagine we have false pins now, and there's also what are they called? They're gates that go block entrance. And I think you could probably do those in medieval age.
Yeah. No, there's probably they had watches at a certain point, so there's probably Swiss watches.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting
things,
I would like to play the second game just because it's going to take place in Prague.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to Prague twice, and the old town and certain districts haven't really changed for Prague is one of the oldest cities in the world, especially in not changing. It actually is.
So it's kind of like the Assassin's Creed thing where you can go and see everything.
Yeah.
The Assassin's Creed game in the Great Pyramid, I think it was. They put an extra chamber in the pyramid, was it the Queen's Chamber they put in or something? And then after the game came out, it was discovered.
Yeah.
But the reason they did that was because there was so many theories already that it existed that they're like, yeah, we'll risk it. And I think that's pretty cool.
Did they add in the tunnel?
What, like the guy that like dynamited his way through the place?
No, the
the
Sphinx tunnel.
That tunnel. Okay, because there's a couple tunnels. There's a guy, he dynamited his way in, and then there was a tunnel. It was a group. It might have been Muhammad's troops.
Yeah.
But it was like Muslim raiders, I believe. They like tunneled into the pyramids at one point, but the Sphinx one would be ancient, and I don't even know if that one's confirmed.
Well, the Egyptian government says it isn't.
Yeah, so it must not be. I don't know if they did that or not, because they did do Oak Island, right? In their one game, they do have the whole Oak Island that you go through. So they like the fringe science stuff.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't doubt they did it.
It's an interesting enough game. Do
you think sword techniques would have been worse? Do you know when the game takes place exactly?
It is when King Wenceslas took over after his father, who was a very good king. I think it's 12th or 13th.
Okay. Because I wonder if, like, I'm going to guess no, but there are some things nowadays, I was trying to think of one, tactics.
Yeah.
You could take an average history or video game fan from today and put them in, like, Alexander the Great's time.
Yeah.
And they would be a super genius. Like, they would be one of the best tacticians around. And it's simply because we have such a large body of knowledge, things are obvious to us that weren't obvious to them.
Yeah.
For instance, I don't know if you saw Oversimplified recently released their third...
No, I haven't seen it.
So when Scipio Africanus fights Hannibal, Hannibal does an opening charge with elephants.
Yeah.
And so Scipio gives his troops the order to just create channels in their ranks.
Yeah.
So they divide into like 6 little groups, and there's a path between all of them. And as Oversimplified puts it, between a suicide charge or walking down an empty lane, the elephants are going to choose the empty lane.
Yeah.
So the elephants just all divert and go through and don't affect the army. And so that would be something we can just, like, if you don't know elephant psychology, that's a huge risk, and you're like, what are you doing? This is not going to work. What are you...
Yeah, well, the square actually took quite a while to develop.
Yeah, because it's also, like...
terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you think this work? You're going to get hit by the horses and killed.
Well, that actually makes me wonder, like, Scipio's genius, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe I could come up with that channel thing. I don't know how elephants work, but, you know, you sit in your tent and you're like, I bet elephants don't want to get stabbed. I don't want to get stabbed. That kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But that would be useless to me, because I'd go into the battlefield and be like, all right, men, split now. And they'd be like, how?
Yeah.
You need to train like crazy.
Yeah.
And they need to trust you like crazy for that to work.
Yeah, there's more to tactics than just, we do this and it works.
Like, you need to have months of training ahead of time, and you also need to build camaraderie with your troops so they actually believe you and obey you.
Like
that's probably where the general's genius really comes in.
The main thing with a square is the horse doesn't want to run into that. Like, no horse, no matter how war trained, is going to run into that.
Yeah.
And unless it's like Viking horses, but that's... do you know that the Vikings drugged their horses? So they gave them the same thing they gave berserkers, basically, so their horses would go nuts and charge into people.
Yeah, I guess if it works.
Yeah.
But actually, a lot of Scipio's victories in that video, he's... I don't know if he's that good of a general. Like, the stuff he does, he kind of does... Like, if I read about it in a book, I would be like, wow, this is ruining my suspension of disbelief. Because he always... I don't know, like, the genius of Scipio seems to be he understands the world, like, perfectly. I don't know how he does, but, like, for instance, when he attacks New Carthage, there's, like, no way to get to New Carthage except this tiny little land bridge, which is super heavily fortified, and then it's surrounded by marshes on all other sides, like, deep marshes. And so he sends his forces to just assault the wall, and so all the soldiers go to the wall to fight them off. And then at the time of year, at the time of day, the tide goes out, and the marshes dropped until they're only about knee-high, and he sends the rest of his army walking across the marsh, and they attack the undefended wall, and they climb up, and there's no one there. And so, first of all, why didn't they leave, like, 10 people on the rear wall? And how did he know that the marsh goes out? Like, this is a Roman, right?
Yeah.
What's he doing in Spain, knowing about the local... Like, does he go and interview every farmer and every...
It could be.
And is that what it takes to be a great general? Is you just... And, like, how much information does he have in his head? Like... You don't go to the farmer and say, which thing would win me this fight, right? Yeah. You say, tell me everything you know. And then you have, like, the most random information in your head. You'll be like, oh, yeah, the geese will be... Because that's what Hannibal did, stuff like that, actually. He would use, like, flocks of geese to cover the sound of his approach, right? Like, how did... Like, knowing what is useful and what isn't and who to interview, that's so different from tactics and strategy in video games. And there's no way... I was trying to think, how would a video game do that, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to have conditionals in games where it's like, under X circumstance, Y happens. So, for example, Age of Wonders, you have a mountain that has 32 movement points to cross the mountain, right?
Yeah.
And you'd have to say, every third turn, the mountain only takes 12 movement points to cross. And that would just be a feature of the game that you don't put anywhere.
Yeah.
And you just have to, like, observe, like, you'd have to, like, look at every tile and be like, oh, wait, it changed this turn. And then you'd be like, okay, I can use that. Like, that's how you'd have to do that to actually represent what generals would do. And I think that could actually be interesting.
Yeah.
It would be annoying if it was tile by tile. That if it was like the entire mountain range, that could be different.
Yeah. It's definitely, for every Scipio, there's 100 people who got drowned by the tide.
Yeah, or they left like a single man on the guard post and they just killed all the soldiers because they're like, oh yeah, hey, there's people trying to climb the wall. Just bring some dudes back.
Yeah.
Like you have the most heavily fortified city in Spain. You don't need that many people to defend the walls.
It's if you look at the Romance of Three Kingdoms and the tactician of the side that lost.
Yeah.
But he is like considered absolute genius. If you look at the stuff he did, it's also insane. Like his maze trap. He brought people into basically a natural maze formation, and then using signal flags, he completely outmaneuvered them in a giant maze filled with mist. And it's like, what? Is this like the romance part of Romance of Three Kingdoms, what this guy did? But it's so many things this tactician did were absolutely amazing. And he was on the losing side. The god of war was also as good as him.
Well, I think, like, if he does it over and over again, then you say, okay, this guy's got something, right?
Yeah.
But Scipio has, like, 3 big victories.
Yeah.
Which makes me think, he might have just gotten lucky, right?
Yeah.
Like, you get 3 of those and you just get lucky every... Like, I think Scipio's good.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's... I think when Hannibal said he was the second best... Or Hannibal said he was the 3rd best general ever, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a reason he didn't put Scipio above himself, because Hannibal had a lot more victories.
Yeah.
Scipio had a couple, but, like, you look at someone like Napoleon, there's no luck involved.
Yeah.
Like, Napoleon won 52 times in a row and then lost a couple and won a few, and, like...
Yeah.
Napoleon was untouchable. He always won. And Napoleon would do some like, little things, but, you know, he'd do stuff like, he would abandon the hill so that they would go to the hill and there'd be no one there.
Yeah.
And so he would have the advantage of surprise, or he would shoot his cannons at the lake the enemy was crossing. Like, little things that are a little bit thinking outside the box, right? But I also wonder with Napoleon, though, like, the French was just the best army they had, right? So,
well, you can say that, however, huge portions of his army weren't the French.
Yeah, but so I guess you could say the genius would be the fact that he made it the best army.
Yeah.
Like, he was able to round up people from every nation.
And that's one of the... So, Alexander the Great, some people say his father gave him the army.
Yeah.
And it's the best army in the world. Yes, it was. But then he used it.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if the Persians were better. I think the Persian army was bigger.
Well, it was. He just smashed his way through it.
Yeah.
His army had... His army also had the most advanced technology in the world at the time. It had a new kind of bow, and it had a new kind of spear formation. And
yeah, they're the hoplites, right? That was their big thing. That was what Philip sort of invented.
No, it wasn't hoplites. It was even longer spears than that. This was the upgrade to the hoplite. This was pikes. And his bow was the leg bow. It was a new kind of crossbow that you would sit down and draw with your legs.
I believe Alexander, because there's an issue with all formation fighting until the Romans come along, I believe, which is that the entire structure slowly moves left over time.
Really?
Yeah, because the guy next to you has your shield, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a shield. The guy next to you has a shield. You want to be behind that guy's shield. So you're moving over to the guy next to you. And then the guy next to you is like, well, I need a shield. So he moves over.
Yeah.
And so they slowly drift. And I think Alexander accounted for that. Like, you would put your bravest guy on the unshielded side, for one thing. But I think he would also, like, aim them a little to the right.
Well, also, they didn't have shields in the pike formation. They were... That's what they're... not pikes, they were Sicera. It was a precursor to the pike, which was just a really, really long spear. And one of the problems... I remember in history class, one of the things we learned about was one of the first times they encountered an army with this new tactic. And they saw the formation, and they laughed at it. Because it was a bunch of guys with really long, unwieldy spears.
Right.
And it's like, they have their short spears and shields. And like, they can't maneuver these things, they can't swing them, they can't use shields. We're just going to overrun them. And then they hit the pike wall.
Right.
And it's, what can you do against it?
You can't get in there.
You can't get close to it. There's like 4 ranks deep.
See, if I was Philip of Macedon, right?
Yeah.
I would go... Like, I don't know why they were so stupid, right? With the whole formation thing, right? Like, I look at the hoplites.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, I have 2 solutions. First of all, everyone gets their own shield. Easy. That's what the Romans did, and it made them the strongest army on earth. Why not do that? Okay, second idea. Give the guy on the anchor end 2 shields. Like, let him defend himself and his... Like, you know, he doesn't need a spear at all. Just give him an extra shield, and then...
Well, so the Vikings is our basis for riot police. So we use we use Vikings and Romans for our riot police. We use the technology of the Romans, and we use the tactic of the Viking. The Viking shield wall was you have a guy in a row,
Yeah.
and then you open up a gap, grab a person, pull them in, and then your best fighters are on the other side.
Right.
And it's a 3 versus 1.
And then nobody can get in. 'cause
Yeah,
you have a
3
shield
best
wall.
fighters.
Right.
And so as the Viking shield walls, you basically keep yoinking people into it.
But I mean, that takes some advanced training and stuff,
Yeah.
right? But I can fix the hoplites with 1 extra shield.
Yeah.
Like, you have 10,000 men and they keep losing because they go like dominoes. I just go, here, let me plug that gap with a single shield. Boom. Done. Solved.
Well,
So,
one of the other weird things, if we go back to, I think it's 8th century, if we go back to 6th to 8th century Europe, their wars were weird compared to basically what we think of wars. It was like 12 dudes fighting 20 dudes. Like that was a battle.
oh, yeah. Well, especially in like England. Right?
Yeah.
There's like no one.
And then like a very big war, like the War of the Roses. I don't know when that happened, but
Yeah, I'm not sure.
those were like several thousand men in armies, and that was considered like the biggest war ever.
Yeah.
It's like 100 men versus 200 men. It's like that's so many people fighting.
But-
Meanwhile, in China, there's tens of thousands.
I think I'm more interested in the general stuff, like that, what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
But just to wrap up my point before, just before we keep going. So my point being, if you were actually sent back in time to to Bohemia, right?
Yeah.
Maybe no one's learned that you hold the sword by the non-pointy end yet. Because, like, all the obvious stuff, they had to learn through trial and error, right?
Yeah, well, that could be. And one thing I will say is they may have better stamina than me. I don't know, but it could also be maybe... Well, I would be a giant in Bohemia. And maybe even though I don't consider myself, like, super fair, super healthy.
Yeah, they're just...
They're small and scrawny and also...
malnourished, yeah.
I might actually have more stamina than I think relative to them in certain ways.
But I think also the creator, he wanted the game to be realistic.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line that became
Complicated.
difficult and hard and complicated. Yeah. Instead of like... Because, you know, realism... When you play D&D, you're like, yeah, you keep track of the torch burning length and stuff, right? And you're like, oh yeah, so it's more nitty-gritty. So it's like, yeah, that's more realistic. But there's a point where that isn't true.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things about Mountain Blade Bannerlord, like, its improvement is it needs better AI.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite things is how they do weapons, is they do have a certain amount of damage values, but they go, alright, so this is the damage value a sword has. Now, if you swing your sword, the damage is actually based on the speed at which you swing it.
Yeah.
So if you're running while swinging your sword, it'll deal more damage. If you're riding a horse and swing it, it will deal even more. The same, if you're running while throwing a javelin, it hurts more. And so their sort of weapons and tactics is partly based on
Can you have like
movement
a...
and kinetic force.
I don't know if there's any compilations on YouTube or anything, but if like, I don't know, someone gets hit by a trebuchet, physics engine goes crazy and they go flying across the battlefield at like 200 kilometers an hour, can they just like kill everyone they pass through with it?
Unfortunately, they don't do that. I think I would like them to, if you were to take the engine, the source engine, if you were to take Source 2
Yeah.
and feed it Bannerlord somehow, like if you were to combine them, you could do that, and that would be absolutely amazing. Because there's certain aspects I really like about Bannerlords, but one of my biggest griefs is their castle battles. They make these awesome castles with like fallback points and huge amount of tactics. And the AI doesn't use them. And as a player, you can try your best to make your troops use them.
Yeah.
But they're so bad at using the defenses that it's better not to.
Yeah, well, that's again back to the Scipio Africanus problem. You can have all this knowledge, but it's useless if your men don't obey.
Yeah.
And getting your men to obey, that's a part of being a great general as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think where the castles actually would probably really shine is in the multiplayer.
Yeah.
Where if you
can actually work together.
If you have like 100 players sitting in a castle, 100 players sieging, Or you have 20 players controlling troops and 20 players defending controlling troops. And it's like, all right, we'll hold these sections of the wall, we'll hold the fallback points, and the people who are sieging are like, okay, how long do we bombard? We have a timer before we lose.
That was the other thing about Hannibal versus Scipio. I think Hannibal actually did better in that fight. Because the reason he lost was... So his elephants didn't work.
Yeah.
If the elephants had worked, easy win for Hannibal.
Yeah.
But they didn't work at all. So Scipio overcame that obstacle. But Scipio had way better cavalry than Hannibal. So his cavalry went out and destroyed Hannibal's cavalry. And then in cavalry fights, what happens is the losers run away and the winners chase them.
Yeah.
Right? So Hannibal arranged his troops so that his worst troops were in the front, and then his second worst troops were behind them, and then his core super soldiers were at the back row.
Yeah.
So Scipio goes through with his army, and they take out all the mercenaries, and then they take out all the like random conscripts from the tribes and whatnot. And then they finally, after hours of fighting, get to Hannibal's actually good troops. And their numbers are about equal at this point. But Hannibal's troops are fresh and better than Scipio's. So, Hannibal won that, right? Like, I think Hannibal won. But what happens is... So basically, the question becomes, can Hannibal win the fight before Scipio's cavalry regroup and come back and hit him in the rear, right?
Yeah. And
he didn't do it in time. So the cavalry regroup, they come and they attack him in the rear, and then you're attacked on two fronts, it's hopeless, you lose, right? But that's like a 60-40 roll, right? Like that's chance, right? Like, will the cavalry regroup in time? Unless you want to tell me that Scipio drilled his cavalry to perfect timing. And
this is the insane thing, where you think about reserves.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you have reserve? Why not throw everything at?
So you don't get attacked in the rear.
Yeah, if Hannibal had, like, pulled back 10% of that core troop.
Yeah.
And had them in wings, not fighting.
Yeah.
And then when the horses come, they hold them off long enough for his corps to defeat their corps, and then you can sweep around into the cavalry and actually face them properly.
Yeah.
But it feels absolutely insane.
The other thing was soldiers. Hannibal probably couldn't afford to do that. Like, he was
outnumbered, his elephants failed. And...
Yeah. Although, it's kind of interesting. Like, Hannibal had a better army in that fight, besides cavalry, right?
Yeah.
You think he would have been like, okay, my elephants, that's like half their army done right there. I've got a bunch of spare, keep some reserve. Like, you think that would have been but he's like, was he thinking elephants will fail? Like, do elephants always... Like, I have not read one satisfying account of an elephant in it. Like, I wonder if Carthage ever won a victory without... Maybe they won one victory really early on. Like, Dido herself, like, rode an elephant into victory, and they're like, this is the best strategy ever. They did it for the rest of their history, and it never worked again. But they're like, come on, it worked. It's so good when it works.
It could have just been the terror aspect of a giant beast.
Yeah. But, like, you always hear, like, the elephant turns around and, like, crushes half their own troops, or it leaves the battlefield, or it misses, or it doesn't want to fight, or like, it just dies, because, you only have 6 of them.
We'd have to look at India's history of warfare and their stories, because they used elephants for a very long time.
I think India's elephants were bigger than Carthage's, too. Carthage had Syrian elephants, which is an extinct species of elephant.
Yeah.
I don't know why they went extinct. Maybe because they kept sucking in war. But they were, like, tiny.
Yeah.
They weren't even big. Like, they were bigger than most things.
Bigger than a house. Great as a mouse.
But they weren't, like... They were small for an elephant, right?
Yeah.
So, like, how scary... Like, is it much... I don't know. I don't know how big... Like, let's say they're 10 feet tall and a normal elephant's 12 feet tall. I don't know how big an elephant is. Like, elephants can be about 20 feet long, which sounds insane to me. That sounds way too large. But,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's true. I measured it out once with a measuring tape, so...
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I know that's true. But it seems like...
They're too big.
That's just too big, yeah.
Yeah.
But, so let's say these ones are like half that size, so they're like twice the size of a horse. Is that, like, more intimidating than 2 horses?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But is it more useful than 2 horses?
Maybe. It's like, there's descriptions of elephants, like war elephants, grabbing people with their trunks and tossing them about.
Would you rather have...
with their tusks?
Like, a unit of, like, cataphracts, right? Like, you can have, like, I don't know, 60... cataphracts.
Yeah.
Like heavy armor, heavy cavalry, right? Or you get like one elephant.
One elephant.
Yeah. Because like the maneuverability of the cataphracts is way higher. And the intelligence, and they can split in half, they can pursue different goals. Archers, I would much rather have the like, archers take down the elephant easily, right? But
so, if I had an elephant, I wouldn't actually use it in combat.
Yeah.
It's a giant mobile lookout post.
Right.
So that's insane information, be able to see the battlefield.
That is what they said Hannibal used his elephants for.
Yeah.
That was what Hannibal, like his own elephant.
Yeah.
He wouldn't fight with it. He would just use it so he could see the battlefield.
Yeah.
So elephants were already used for that. So that
Yeah.
that is one use of elephants that Carthage probably was taking advantage
Yeah,
of.
if I have like a 20-foot tall giant elephant.
But if you're in like Africa, right?
Yeah.
And you want a mobile viewing platform, why not grab a giraffe? Can a giraffe support a human on their head?
Way more ill-tempered.
But I want to know if a giraffe can support a
Probably
human
not.
on their head.
Probably not.
Like giraffes are pretty big too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen a video of like a giraffe fighting a lion, but like giraffes, we know them for their really long necks, right?
Yeah.
But their body is like horse. It's bigger than a horse still.
Yeah.
Like they're big animals and they're tall.
So moose are the last of the megafauna.
What about bison?
Bison aren't megafauna.
What about super bison? That's a real animal. They're extinct. Yeah. But yeah. I thought bison were megafauna.
No.
Oh.
No, the moose are the last of the megafauna. And like if you had moose cavalry.
Yeah.
And
then people have had that in history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Norwegians have had moose cavalry.
There's a very small.
Yeah. But like a moose it's about the same size as a horse.
No, they aren't. They're huge.
So are horses. You ever seen a horse?
Have you ever seen a moose?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen a moose in a horse pasture, and it looked about the same as a horse. Horses are, like, people aren't afraid enough of horses. So maybe it makes them not realize how big horses are. But horses are like 10 feet tall, right? Like,
No, they're not.
yes, they are. My head doesn't clear a horse's shoulders. Horses are giants, all right? They're one of the biggest land animals there is. And that's like a normal horse. Like, get a draft horse or a quarter horse, and they're like twice the size of a horse.
Yeah, you can't ride a draft horse into battle.
You don't need to. You just scare off. Like, you say the elephant has the intimidation factor. You just ride your draft horse into battle, and everyone runs away because you got a horse, and they don't. Like, what do you do?
I was saying the elephant has that. The elephant would have that too, but
Yeah.
you'd use the elephant as a viewing platform.
All right. Well, let's say you have a better viewing platform. Do you want the elephant or do you want the cataphracts?
I think I want the cataphracts just because I can split them and range around a battlefield. And so there's two things in knife fights.
Yeah.
Or any unarmed versus armed person, which is the focus on the battle becomes the knife.
Yeah.
And so, if you're actually fighting someone, I watched a video on like self-defense versus in a knife fight, and it's insane the maneuvers and things you do, and the whole combat's about controlling the knife.
Yeah.
And it's based on getting the knife out of their hand or getting the knife yourself. And the one person was saying this is the best way to deal with a knife, and a different person who's talking about knife defense said the best way to deal with a knife fight is the person's going to focus on the knife.
Yeah.
And the knife can take you out very fast. However, there are things you can do to mitigate that. And then you can focus on beating your opponent while they're focused on the knife.
Okay, so let's...
And so, we're getting to that, is if you have an elephant,
Yeah.
your army says, we have the elephant, we cannot lose. Your enemy says, they have the elephant, if we kill that, they break.
Right.
And so the whole battle becomes about the elephant.
But then you can use the elephant to control your enemy as well.
Yes.
You can you can change what they do based on, okay, we'll put the elephant here, and therefore they're going to put all their archers over there, so we can do whatever we... Okay, so then...
So the elephant's putting all your eggs in one basket, basically.
So you're Darius, and Alexander's rampaging through your lands, right?
Yeah.
And I forget what the heavy cavalry of the Persians were called, but they had a unit of, they might have been called cataphracts even, but they had like these elite, heavily armored, which was really weird for the time period. Right? Like they had these super soldier troops, maybe a little bit later when they fought the Romans. Okay, yeah, you're fighting the Romans then. Yeah. So there's the story of the Romans. They see, I don't know if you know the story or not. I think I've talked about it before. Roman legion goes out. They see a Persian army of horsemen in ragged robes, and so they get ready to fight. And then just before the battle starts, they all take off their robes and throw them to the side, and suddenly the entire army is shining because they're all wearing like chainmail.
Yeah.
Like they're wearing mail from head to toe. And the Romans are like, oh, they just have an army of invincible horsemen. And the entire legion was destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So, you're Darius, let's say, fighting Alexander. You can either have a platoon of like 60 of those horses, right?
Yeah.
Or a cannon. Like a Napoleonic cannon.
Do you have people who can use the cannon?
Yeah. You can use the cannon. You've got unlimited shots with the cannon, let's say.
I'd take the cannon.
Yeah?
Yeah. Cannon's main value was terror.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think the horses would do way more damage, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think a cannon's going to be killing many people at all. Yeah. Like, especially if you just spread out a bit, right? Because, like, you have to maneuver it, you have to, like, I don't know how fast a cannon shoots, but I doubt you're shooting more than because they have to cool down as well, right? So you can't just shoot them every time the barrel's free. You have to
can fire a cannon every 3 minutes.
You actually have to let the barrel cool for a while, and then you have to. And then, so I think you're okay. Let's say 3 minutes, sure. Well, 3 minutes is pretty fast actually. That would be like.
Yep, that was Napoleon's firing rate with his squad.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
Yeah, that's where he started. He was a cannon commander.
If I had a shot every 3 minutes, I'd probably take the cannon as well. I'm trying to think like. The comparison. Okay, you get.
There's an interesting thing on the cataphracts, briefly, is so Rome conquered that area.
Yeah.
Later, and that's what became the Eastern Roman Empire.
Yeah.
The Eastern Roman Empire used cataphracts later on. That was one of their main divisions of units. And they fully embraced cataphracts, and like they were the core of their army, along with legionnaires of a slightly different design. But the Romans did beat them.
Yeah.
Which I find that interesting, is Rome eventually did beat the cataphracts.
With walls, I guess, probably.
Roman engineering.
Scorpions and walls. And
stuff. Roman engineering is basically...
we've got this open plain. We can ride our cavalry. Wait, why is there a fortress in the middle of the plain?
Trench warfare, basically, yeah.
Yeah. So,
also, there's this ridiculous thing about Rome, which, the Roman war machine is called that. One of the things that people don't quite understand is, at that time of warfare, you're like, all right, we've got this castle, we've got all this terrain, we'll see an army coming, there's supply chains, there's problems. Romans would appear out of nowhere. And why that is the army would literally be building a road well on the march to their siege location or their combat location. And if they knew that they needed to have more than one front, they would build it 2 roads. And so you basically, you can imagine almost a little, an overhead map of just this little road slowly appearing through the wilderness, trees getting cut down, way stations being built for guarding supply chains. And it's all right, we just need to weather the storm against the legion. Their reinforcements will trickle in, but so will ours. It's not trickle in, it's a whole nether legion would march down the road and reinforce.
Would you rather have... You could have a platoon of Napoleons. You just get 50 Napoleons. Or... who's a okay general, but not good, but more physically, Julius Caesar. Oh, actually, Julius Caesar might be better than Napoleon. Charles the Hammer, or you can have 200 Charles. No, you can have 50 Charles the Hammers. Yeah. Okay, so you get 50 Napoleons or 50 Charles the Hammers, and your opponent gets the other one.
I don't know who Charles the Hammer is.
He was Charlemagne's dad.
Okay.
He was the guy that united France by hammer. He's a good leader.
Yeah.
But we don't talk about him like we talk about Napoleon or Charlemagne.
Well, Napoleon has a gun.
Well, no. Their accoutrement is the same as the rest of your army. So it's whatever they have, right? So it's if you're let's say you are both Roman armies. So your Napoleons and your Charles the Hammers both get standard soldier gear. Yeah.
The thing about Napoleon is it's his leadership, which is his main thing.
Yeah, well, that's my point, right? Yeah. So you could have better fighters, or you could have 50 Napoleons.
Even Napoleon's tactics, I think, was probably good. He's probably a good tactician. He's probably a very good strategist. I think his main thing was his leadership.
So you could put him in charge, though. You're allowed to,
Yeah.
But Napoleon himself, though, did say it's better to have a bad general than 2 good ones.
Probably.
Because that way your troops aren't working at cross purposes, right?
Yeah.
So...
I mean, you could just turn the spare Napoleons into sergeants.
Yeah, you just deputize one Napoleon. You're okay, you're in charge. The others have to listen. But what if they're too much of a diva? They're no, I want to do it my way.
Yeah.
And then Charles the Hammer just...
A bunch of Charles the Hammers, just hammer time.
Yeah.
So, have you read the first book in Son of the Black Sword, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's the one with the sword.
Ashok, the Tao.
Yeah.
He is the law.
I think I read all the trilogy.
There's 5 books now.
Oh. I read that he goes to the monks in the mountain and some other things.
The House of Demons.
I read 3 books.
Yeah, with the assassins.
Yeah.
So there's 5 books. There's going to be a 6th one written.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things in it is the land that they're in has an insane warrior culture, and the soldiers are all very professional, and the protectors are even more so. They're superhuman soldiers.
Yeah.
And they hate fortress rods, which are basically muskets. And the terrifying thing about a musket is, so protectors can, as you said, they can pluck arrows out of the air.
Yeah.
Like, you fire arrows at a protector, he'll grab them out of the air, he'll shoot them back at you with his own bow, or he'll deflect them with his sword.
Yeah.
But a fortress rod, a musket ball, will just hit you and kill you.
Yeah.
And so, even though it's like, it takes a longer time to load than a bow, it's slightly less accurate. If you're a warrior culture, and there's 20 guys with fortress rods firing at you, like, your battle brothers are just going to die. They can't even block it with their shields. Their armor gives them nothing. No skills they have are good enough to fight it.
Yeah.
And so,
sometimes that extra 5-10% makes all the difference.
Yeah, and then amp that up to a cannonball. I was saying, like, the terror of a cannon is bam. I'm watching Soviets play Holdfast, and they're marching along, and then cannonball just, like, wipes out 3 guys. Or the artillery strikes.
Yeah, your skill becomes useless.
Yeah.
And it's all down to luck, right?
Yeah.
And so that does shake your morale, and unless you think that, my skill is God-given, therefore my luck is God-given. Yeah. And so God didn't like those guys.
Yeah.
You gotta sweet talk your soldiers.
Maybe that's the problem with the law, is they don't have God-given skills. It's all about the law to them.
I bet you could dodge a musket.
Well, in book 4, Ashok actually talks about that. Which is
like, you couldn't dodge the bolt itself, but you could watch the guy.
Yeah, no, that's what Ashok basically realized, that fortress rods aren't actually that scary.
Yeah.
You just watch the gunner, and when he pulls the trigger, you move.
Although I think, like, it depends on what tech level they're at, right? Because like a matchlock, they wouldn't know when they're shooting.
Yeah.
They would just be like, tss, or like a pan.
Pepper box.
Yeah, like, you light it and then you wait for the gun to go off, right? So, like, you can't just predict it because they don't know when it's going to happen either. Yeah. And actually, that's the same with a compound bow.
Yeah.
It's actually banned in tournaments, but you can get a hydraulic release on compound bows. So what you do is you press it in, and the hook will go down.
Yeah. And
then it will twist, and it will slowly release pressure, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's pneumatic, not hydraulic, I'm not sure. But anyways, it slowly releases pressure at a random rate.
Yeah.
And so then, and why you do that is because if the archer knows when the arrow is going to shoot, they might twitch at the last second because they're expecting the shot, or they might brace for it, right? But if it's a random release, they just have to hold perfect form until it shoots. So the archer themselves doesn't know when the arrow is going to go. And you can do the same thing with normal bow, where you just let it slowly slip out of your fingers, sort of. Like, it's not quite that, but you're moving your shoulder back while it's slipping out of your fingers. So watching them might not, like, nowadays, you pull the trigger, the gun fires, right?
Yeah.
But if you're fighting the protectors, maybe you want a little, like, you have a modern machine gun. Well, a machine gun, you could just, but...
Well, that's to say, a pepper box will fire when you fire it.
Yeah.
It's just, you have no idea where the projectiles are going.
Right. But I think, like, there could also be that variability of you can't just... So I'm actually slightly going back on my idea that you could dodge a musket. I'm less sure now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more. I think...
the other thing about Ashok is, like, the protectors are superhuman, and then he's superhuman on top of that, so...
Yeah. I mean, once you throw in, like, superpowers, then it gets...
Yeah.
He could probably see the muzzle flash at just the right time, and,
Well, it's not even muzzle flash, it's just the Angrividel will tell him to dodge, and he'll dodge.
Yeah. I mean, there used to be those... Actually, those might have been fake. I'm not sure. Those guys would catch the bullets in their teeth?
That's not fake. It's a very certain kind of gun, and it's a trick.
Yeah.
It's like tearing a phone book in half.
Yeah.
There's a trick to it. Do you know that one of the tricks of tearing a phone book in half?
It's not hard or something.
I mean,
you can have, like, a little, like, razor blade, but...
No, it's not that. So what you do is you compress it.
Yeah.
And so all the pages pop up slightly.
Yeah.
And there's air spaces in between.
So you're just ripping them one at a time.
And then you start a tear. Once that tear started, then you can tear the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that was what I saw a magician say, is, like, the trick is that it's not actually hard. It's like if you know what you're doing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, it's the same principle. If you have a ruler on a desk,
yeah,
and you can slap it, and it'll go fly off the desk. If you put a ruler on a desk and you put a piece of paper on top of it, and you slap it, the ruler won't move. Not like that. The paper will...
like this?
That might work. Might need to be a bigger piece of paper.
This is also a very sturdy ruler.
Yeah, it's a very sturdy ruler. But you did see how much paper deformed. There's probably more resistance there than your initial hit.
Because it's like I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like there's a huge amount of air resistance on it.
Yeah. And so if it's a big enough piece of paper with a much lighter ruler,
Yeah. I mean,
it will also create suction after a certain point. You'll create a cavitation bubble underneath.
You know what I bet it is? A lot of rulers can bend.
Yeah.
That one can't bend.
Yeah.
So if you have a ruler that can bend,
Yeah.
the force of the bend will be less than the needed to lift it off.
Yeah.
So your hand will just go through and it'll straighten out.
Yeah.
Whereas with that ruler, there's nowhere for it to go.
Yeah.
It would have to stop the entire force of my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need a bendy ruler for
You
that.
need also a bigger piece of paper that's slightly floppy, because those are rigid piece of paper. If it's floppy, then it will create a bubble of air inside, and it will actually create a vacuum when you lift up at the point of the ruler.
Oh. I wonder if that... I bet that would have worked even just with these pieces of paper if it had been like a more bendy ruler.
Yeah.
Then like...
Though there's still, like, it deformed the paper there.
Yeah.
And so, like, force is enacted.
Yeah, it didn't just lift the paper off of it. Yeah. Like the paper didn't just blow away. Mm-hmm. It actually like crumpled, which, I wouldn't have expected really.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, who knew? Why do you know that?
I watch videos on Science Room, like tricks like the teacher shows the students and they're not expecting the result.
Right.
One of my favorite ones. Our science teacher did this to us in grade 8.
Yeah.
So we're in our grade 8 science class, and so he had two cups in front of us. And he's like, and one of them was see-through, the other wasn't. And it was a cup of water. And he poured the cup of water into the other cup. And then he told a student to come forward. And the student came forward. It was like a little grade 8 student, so like 13 years old, 12, 13. And he took the cup and he flipped upside down over their head.
Yeah.
And no water came out. And they flipped back and put on desk. How did I do this? And so we all like gave us our different ideas and same things. And he reached in the cup and he pulled up a bunch of cotton balls.
Yeah. Oh, so they absorbed all the water.
Yeah, and then they like stuck to the inside.
Right. Oh, that's clever.
And so it's like it's this little trick.
Yeah, you know what we could have done instead of using that ruler is we could have used that file, right? And obviously the file would have moved, right?
Yes.
So yeah, it's clearly the property of the ruler being bendy is the factor we're
Yes.
Yeah. Although the file probably would have again still torn through the paper.
Yeah.
Or like crumpled.
If we had, I bet if we had a sufficiently large enough piece of paper.
Yeah.
Well, so
well, it'd have to be stronger than like me, right?
Yeah.
So, because you want the ruler to be weaker.
Like if we had a giant piece of construction paper, like that sort of like multi-layered material construction paper, that are quite large pieces.
Yeah. But even then, like if I slap it, that's my whole body weight to an extent, right? Like it has to stop the full force of my arm. So.
So actually, what you did there is partly the principle that martial arts classes have trouble with. So I watched this video of so it was the Viking shield wall.
Yeah.
And they said so each guy's supporting each other, so it's really hard to crush through.
Yeah.
It's like we're going to have our biggest guy, and it's a guy called Bear, and he steps forward. It's this huge, like 6'3", slightly overweight, very muscly man. It's like he's going to charge the shield wall and like collide with it, and you're going to see that you can hold him off. And he charges forward and stops, then hits the wall because he can't commit to throwing his whole force against it. Where I've been in martial arts classes where the teacher will go, all right, this one student, like, do this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, try as hard as you can. And I'll try as hard as I can, and it'll slightly mess up the demonstration. And then that's actually when it shows if the technique is good or not, is when your student starts to overpower you. And even Brett Rolston had the example of, he was showing like this move, not Brett Rolston, Peter Rolston.
Yeah.
Was showing this move, and giving an example, of course it wouldn't move this guy. And our dad actually met the guy he's talking about, and it's this like 6'6" dockyard worker.
Yeah.
And he's so powerful that even if you like tried the best martial arts technique ever on him, it just won't work.
Yeah.
He's too big, he's too strong, he has too much mass. Like
I wonder if the elephant, we were talking about these guys, they can't dodge the arrow.
Yeah.
But they can dodge the arrow, but they can't dodge the musket because it's too fast, right? And that's only a slight difference, but it's just enough to get over their superhuman.
Yeah.
Right. So with an elephant, you think about it, a horse can take a couple shots from an arrow.
Yeah.
But you have a musket, you can take down the horse.
Yeah.
But an elephant can take a couple shots from a musket.
Yeah.
And so suddenly you have a thing that doesn't fall when you shoot it.
Yeah.
And so it's just a little bit stronger, but it's enough that it overcomes your defense, which is stopping it from getting to you.
It's fair enough. In the charge of the Rohirrim versus the Oliphant, when they're firing arrows against them, their legs were peppered with arrows, and they had to scream, aim for the face. And Aramir threw a javelin at one. And they had, like, the The Rohirrim were insane. They were riding underneath elephants and hacking at their legs. It's
Orwell has a story of a elephant that broke free in India.
Yeah.
And they couldn't bring it down. Like, people were shooting it and attacking it and running away, and it was killing just person after person, destroying the town center. Yeah. And they couldn't stop it. So, they are pretty tanky
there's
animals.
a 60-year-old elephant in India, which is huge. Like, you look at videos of this thing, it is huge.
Yeah. Isn't that one they all worship? And
yeah, they worship. And it's gone on, 8 rampages and killed several hundred, around 100 people.
Oh, jeez.
And, they subdue it somehow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, So that elephant, it's a giant Indian elephant.
Yeah.
So it's as big as an African elephant or something.
Yeah.
But the first time I saw a video of it, the camera angle was such that I didn't realize that everyone in the video was sitting down. Yeah. And I thought this thing was like an elephant. I was like, these people go up to its ankles. How big is this thing? But everyone was actually sitting in the shot. So it's big, but it's not like...
Yeah.
It's... Yeah. And it's big for an Indian elephant too.
Yeah.
And I think that was the other thing was Hannibal's elephant wasn't a Syrian elephant. It was an Indian elephant.
So he had a very big elephant.
Yeah, he had a bigger elephant than normal.
Imagine if they had woolly mammoths. Besides diabetes exhaustion.
There was Jefferson. First of all, this blows my mind when I think about it because I still don't quite understand the full extent. But when Jefferson and George Washington and that was the same time period, I guess. Yeah. And Benjamin Franklin, and they were all like, we're founding America, and this is America. The thing I never can conceptualize in my head, they were all in Washington, which is in the east of the United States. They didn't own, California and Montana and Texas and, Colorado and Oregon. Those weren't part of the United States. The United States was a tiny country. It was about a quarter the size it is today. Yeah. So it was still a big country, but it was a quarter the size it was. They didn't have Louisiana.
They had to buy that later.
Yeah. Jefferson bought it, so they got it pretty early on.
Yeah.
They doubled the size of the United States in the first decade or something. That was a pretty good deal. But
Studio C has a video on that.
Oh yeah?
Where it was, so they have a realtor.
Yeah.
So it's Napoleon and Jefferson buying it.
Yeah.
And they have a realtor. And so Napoleon says what he wants has some fairly good prices. And the realtor's no, let me deal with this. And sells the land for absolutely nothing as it was sold in history. Yeah. And so it's and this is meant to be Napoleon's realtor.
Yeah.
And so Napoleon feels robbed and he leaves upset. And then Jefferson's like, well, we've got this land now. Yes, you've got mostly swampland that floods, that's full of bugs, and it's completely rubbish. Wait, I lost this deal too? That's right. The realtor always wins. And then she walks out.
Yeah, it was $10 million or something, I think, for... But Napoleon did that on purpose, right? He needed money and he wanted to help out the Americans.
Yeah, he needed money, wanted to help out. The Americans and the French were actually pretty staunch allies.
Yeah, but I think but it's crazy. They were just this little bit over here, in the Northeast, right?
Yeah.
But Jefferson heard stories from the West, which was a land that nobody had been to, which is another thing that's there was the natives had been there, but they hadn't. And there's a lot of stuff about American history I didn't realize. I think they're called the Indian Wars. It was 100 years of the United States Army fighting the natives. They actually conquered that land. It was not just in Canada, they settled and they settled some more and they settled some more until suddenly they had all the land. They were fighting hardcore for 100 years and conquering each other's land, driving each other back and forth. Mostly the natives were losing.
Yeah.
A few times the Apache and the Comanche they would win, but it was mostly the Americans.
Well, so something that makes Alberta unique in Canada is most places actually did have deals and settlements.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of forts in the south of Alberta, and that's because they actually also fought smaller wars with the Indians.
Right.
Or First Nations.
And the reason they were fighting them, they kind of saw them as a natural part of the land, so it's you're driving off the wolves and whatnot. Because the Pueblo people in I guess it'd be kind of New Mexico now.
Yeah.
They didn't, and Nevada possibly. They didn't fight them. They were you own this land, because the Pueblo people had cities.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh yeah, these people own this land obviously because they have cities, but these people don't have any cities, so obviously this isn't their land. And so it's kind of this funny difference of viewing how they interacted with it. But Jefferson was a huge fan of First Nation people. He thought they were awesome. He was a big I don't know, native simp. I don't know how you call it. he thought the native people were really cool. And,
native boo?
Yeah, native boo. Well, kind of a marabou. He was in a marabou.
Yeah.
Because he was like, oh yeah, we have our own identity. We aren't British. We're First Nations. We dress up in paint and we're right, like we're savages. Americans are free like the natives. So yeah, he was in a marabou basically.
Yeah.
But so he talked to some of his First Nation friends from like modern day California and whatnot, and they would tell him there was mammoths there.
Huh.
Like, well, Jefferson was alive.
Yeah.
Like 1770s sort of thing, right? Or yeah, 1776 was the... Kind of makes you wonder. And then there's stories from here where people talk about like, you know, giant animals and stuff.
Giant beavers.
Like the one that always... Like those make sense. Like that's the ancient stuff, right? But the one that always gets me is when you talk about like any culture in North America, right? They have the spirit animals. Like you have a dream about a mouse, it means you're powerful. You have a dream about a bear, it means you're weak. Like, you know, like you're sick or something. And then they have their totem poles with all their animals. You put the raven and the crow, well, the raven and the orca and the bear and but then there's, and you probably know where I'm going with this, but there's two animals that are just treated as the other animals, but they're like the Thunderbird and the Sasquatch. They're just like just another animal. But it's like they're such like they're not like, you know, the giant sloths and the giant beavers, like we have fossil records of those. We're like, yeah, that makes sense. They know about these things because they saw them when they were there. But the Thunderbird, especially the Thunderbird, is a weird one because like Bigfoot actually makes sense, like to a degree. I think like after I wouldn't have said that maybe like 5 years ago, but after watching so many Bob Gimlin videos, it's like, okay, Bigfoot, and Les talking about his stuff, it's like Bigfoot could be like another human-like animal that's really good at hiding. Les had this idea, Les Stroud, he was saying, so you take a human savant and they're basically supernatural in one field, right? Imagine something that's supernatural in every field that a human already can be supernatural in. They would be unfindable. Like like there's that story, I can't remember who it was, some famous American cowboy hero or something. He had this, I think it was an Apache or Navajo friend, and he said, how come we took like so many years to defeat you guys? Like, how could we never see your war parties coming? He's like, okay, close your eyes. Okay, they're just in the middle of this flat, like salt flat desert basically. He's like, close your eyes. Okay, closes his eyes, and then count to 30 and then open them. He's like, okay, so he counts to 30. He opens his eyes. The native guy's gone. He's like, there's no bushes. There's no hills. It's completely flat. I can see for like 15 kilometers, and he's gone. Like, now you apply that skill, which is like, maybe all the Navajo could do that, or maybe this was like the best of the Navajo, but you take that skill and you give it to every Bigfoot. It makes sense. But then you take the Thunderbird, which is also in all the stories, but this thing is like actually magical in a lot of the stories. Like, bringing the rain can be like a kilometer long. Like, what is that? I think those ones are probably mythological. But there is also, you know, the 15-foot wingspan, the 20-foot wingspan. I saw a bird, I'm pretty sure, at a 15-foot wingspan once.
Well, so Thunderbirds probably would fly very high up. And so that would potentially make them hard to find.
I guess. Like, you think...
And we have areas in the world which are just unnamed mountains that people don't go to.
But you've heard those stories, right? Like the people that fly from Alaska to... like the Aleutians or something, and they see those giant birds below their planes.
Well, so Yeti. So the area the Yeti lives in is the area where a different very elusive creature lives. Do you know what that creature is?
Snow leopard?
Yeah. Do you know about the story of them trying to film snow leopards for the BBC documentary?
I think I saw it at one point. I don't really remember.
It took them 3 years to get several hours of footage.
Yeah, they're pretty stealthy creatures.
And so snow leopards live in these valleys that are everywhere, and they can climb over them, they live in them. The reports of Yetis, I think this is really cool if it's an adaptation they have, is there's like these steep valleys that are kind of hard to travel, but they're super lush. Like if Nepal, that's the area. If you could manage the logistics, which is basically impossible because of the landscape, but if you could manage the logistics to get into these valleys, Nepal would be one of the most resource-rich, well-fed, wealthy places on Earth. But it's impossible to get from valley to valley to valley because of the terrain. Like, it is some of the worst terrain in the world. And then...
But they're like really lush valleys in there and stuff?
Yeah, like resourceless, lush...
Resourceful,
Yeah, like various different things, even mineral deposits.
So it's kind of like the Nahani mountain range.
Yeah. And then, so the Yetis, apparently, like the footprints of them, is they're jumping in between the valleys. Like at their not like huge valleys, but like at their narrowest points.
Yeah.
So basically, like you go down, you get up.
Yeah.
So they're like bounding between them and climbing down them. Like one of the descriptions is, a guy saw Yeti tracks, is he's looking down this valley and he's following the Ceph's footprints because like Yeti footprints, so you follow them.
Yeah.
And then the thing basically just walks vertically down into a valley. And he can't follow it anymore.
Mm.
And so...
They're not jumping like 50 feet.
No.
They're just, okay.
They're like bounding. And
Right. They're like mountain goats.
Yeah.
Right.
And like 10 feet jumps and stuff. Like a 10-foot gap's going to stop a human.
Yeah.
But it's going to jump the 10 feet, no problem.
Yeah, and then it can drop down a bunch. And
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like, it's like spider monkeys and whatnot, they can...
Yeah, and so it's like, what do they have to eat? They have a huge amount of resources to eat. They have the build to travel it by the footprints. It's yeah, and the Navajo, like that whole area is in Canada is like impossible. Like the only areas we really have mapped out are around rivers.
Oh, in the Nahanni, you mean?
Yeah,
Not the Navajo.
Yeah, the Nahanni.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Nahan Valley.
Like the it's like the Navajo. I think that's like open plains.
Like we know about the rivers and the areas.
Yeah, and even the rivers can be a little dangerous to go down.
Even the Yukon has areas. We only really go around the rivers. Right? The
You know the Yukon River is huge.
Yeah.
Like if you like near the end of the Yukon River in Alaska, it's like 2 kilometers wide or more.
Yes.
Like it's huge.
The Robert Service poem, "There's Strange Things Done."
Yeah.
So a lot of hunters up here will say, "Oh, by Wolf Point is where I got that bison," or by Old Dead Tree.
Yeah.
And they're basically giving a name for a place, but they're actually not letting you know where they went.
Yeah.
Because you don't want someone else to go to your hunting spot. And part of hunting, we'll go with winter hunting because weirdly it's actually some of the easiest hunting to do. You can get on a snow machine.
Yeah.
And you can go out and you can do bison hunting. And so when I was younger, I went out on one of these bison hunts. And one of the things that we did is go onto snowmobiles and we went across this lake bed. And one of the guys with us said this was the first year we did it. He wanted to try up in the mountain area.
Yeah.
And so we went off this trail up into the mountains. And reflecting on it right now, I have absolutely no idea where we were. Like none whatsoever going around those mountains. Because the second year what we did is we followed a lake valley. We carried along the lake valley. And then a guy said, okay, there's a herd nearby. And so we waited for like 4 hours and they actually got bison that year with our group. But when we were on the snowmobiles going in the mountains, it's like, where on earth are we? How did we find our way back? Like, what was that trip?
One of the first surveyors this was before the boundaries were really defined, right?
Yeah.
He was Alaska and the Yukon. And he was walking around and his report said, this is the hardest terrain on earth to survey. Yeah. And it shall never be done. And people, I cannot emphasize this enough, people in the South looking for my report will never understand, but we cannot account for this land. Like, it's just too difficult to travel. And satellites, I think, partially disproved him.
Yeah.
But the amount of technology you needed to...
Yeah.
Because, no car, even planes, you're not going to...
Yeah.
It's not going to work. There's a lot of crashed planes in the mountains because it's not safe and there's nowhere to land. So
yeah, exactly.
And you can only see so much from a plane. Like Nahanni especially, there's caves everywhere.
Yeah.
And supposedly hot springs with mammoths in them and stuff. So
there's caves everywhere in the Yukon too. It's just they're really hard to get to. And they're quite small. And then Alaska as well. Like Alaska is huge.
Yeah.
And the settled part of Alaska is the south of Alaska along the coastline. There's a huge amount of Alaska that people aren't really in.
The same is true for the Yukon.
Yeah.
And for any of the north of North America.
Yeah.
It's all empty. Alaskans probably cover more than most in a way because they actually have a few settlements like Chicken and whatnot that are mildly populated. Resolute's in NWT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a few bases we have too in places, but
well, even Northwest Territory, it's completely different. They don't have quite the same amount of mountains.
But they have the Nahanni Mountain Range.
Yeah, they have the Nahanni Mountain Range. That's in their west.
Yeah.
The east of NWT is this weird pockmarked land full of lakes.
Yeah.
that no decent person would want to travel in.
Just mosquitoes everywhere.
Yeah.
And
coyotes and wolves.
And the dog rib people. I think that's what they're called.
Yeah.
You know why the capital is called Yellowknife? It's because there was the Yellowknife people, like the dog rib and whatnot. They had this huge supply of copper, so they would make all their tools out of copper. So they had yellow knives. It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. And Yellowknife's also like basically as far south in the territory as it can be, right?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure where it is. I think it is in the south. But
it's like all the capital cities of territories or provinces in Canada are as far south as they can be. Except maybe for the third territory. What's that called?
Nunavut?
Yeah, Nunavut.
Yeah. What about it?
Its capital isn't...
Iqaluit? Iqaluit's pretty north,
yeah. Yeah. Like, it's the exception to that rule.
Yeah. Yeah, Iqaluit's not, like, as north as it can be, but it's pretty close to it. Mm-hmm. They don't really have land after that. It's just frozen water.
Yeah.
Reading about the warfare of the... I guess they'd be called the Yukoners and the Inuit. They were both Inuit groups, but they lived in the Yukon River Delta. So this is in Alaska. Yeah. Because Alaska has most of the Yukon, right? River. And they have this giant delta there. And there was this little war that lasted like 700 years in the region called the Bow and Arrow War Days. And the way they fought each other, like, we're talking about Bohemia, where it's like, maybe they just sucked at tactics and stuff, right? So the way that they would fight in these Bow and Arrow War Days was you would typically make sure you had more people than your opponent, and then you were good to go. And you would attack. And it was always raids and ambushes and stuff. But if they saw you coming, then you'd have a pitched battle. These were rare, but you would have a pitched battle. And what would happen with a pitched battle is the attackers would line up on one side in a line, and the defenders would line up on one side on a line. Everyone would have bows. And then you would start by yelling insults and, hand gestures, and you'd tell stories of your greatest heroes and whatnot. And then you'd shoot each other. It's like British warfare combined with Celtic warfare. Yeah. It seems like such a terrible idea. It's
like ultimate dodgeball.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was the thing. Their training was weird. So to train for the wars, they would play games like you throw sticks at each other and you have to jump over the sticks. So they'd practice so they could jump over arrows and they could deflect arrows with sticks and stuff. Yeah. Thinking, that's all well and good, but could you, build a wall in that time or a shield or... They had shields, but I guess because there was so much raiding and shields are heavy, you wanted to be able to deflect with whatever you had on hand.
What was the seat? The unit in Age of Empires 3, which is the big hide shield with the two axe throwers hiding behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would be handy. But, there's heavy and you're getting raided, so you can't have it with you at all times, right? Yeah. And also resources are scarce, so I guess that's a bit of an issue. But it would be interesting war to watch because their main thing is deflecting, right? Yeah. So it would be like watching Jedi fight. They'd be pew, 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 pew.
Deflecting it with their bows.
I guess you could. They said they had sticks for it, but...
Well,
the bow's a stick.
In The Ranger's Apprentice, there's this one point where... so they're with the equivalent of the Japanese king. Yeah. And the assassin shoots the arrow at him. And the Ranger's Apprentice reaches out with his bow and slaps the arrow out of the air as it's flying towards the general's head.
Yeah, you got a big... It makes sense. It gives you more area to cover. And so that's how they... because, there was a story, there's a bunch of men in the men's house. Because I guess all the Inuit were gay or something, I don't know. But a bunch of men in the men's house. And so the Yukoners went and they blocked the door on the men's house. And then they started shooting arrows in through all the gaps in the building. And there was a 3-day siege. And then this part I don't understand. So an old woman walked into the men's house to tell them, okay, you're not going to win the siege. You have to bust out of there. So my question with that is, okay, so the siegers blocked up the place. And then some old lady just excuse me, dear, I'll just come in.
So the Inuit men are all really big and burly and manly. Yeah. And they blocked off the men's door. Yeah. And they're too big to fit out. Their shoulders are too broad.
But the women can still get in through the women's door.
No, the little old woman, she's like a little babushka, a little grandma. She's 3 feet tall. Yeah. And there's a door perfectly shaped for her to just walk through going
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been it.
And the Yukoners are all big burly men and they're straight of jaw, so straight of neck, and so they don't look down. Yeah. And so she's shorter than their sight line.
So they can't see her go into the building. Yeah. So yeah, she goes in, and I guess during these wars, there's a weird division of labor where women were the tacticians, and men were the warriors and the historians. Which I think the historians should be the tacticians. Like, I think those should definitely be combined. But women were the tacticians, and so
this is our greatest historian, and he's gotten shot in through the head.
I guess there's that. But so the women's the strategy for a raiding party is you have a bunch of men and one woman. Yeah. She would be like the sort of the general, I guess, of the war party.
Yeah.
But so the old woman goes into the men's house and she's like, okay, you're not going to win. You're stuck in here. You're going to starve to death. So you have to wait until the sun is shining in their eyes, and then you got to burst out the door, and you just got to go there, deflect all the arrows, and then kill them. And so that's what they did. Like they just jumped out with sticks, and they're like, pew, 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 pew.
So we actually might be thinking about the scale wrong here.
Yeah.
Because we're thinking of like smaller, like even big groups, but like raid parties and men's hut.
Yeah.
This could have been a castle.
Right.
That they're in, like an actual fortified, like wooden castle.
Right. So if you block off the main gate, then you are limiting the army. But
and you surround it with archers, right?
Yeah.
And you're firing through the gaps. There are sally gates. Yeah. But if you have a warrior walk out of a sally gate, he's going to get shot because their main weapon's a bow.
Yeah.
Like it's not a house like the size of our house. Like the men's house.
Yeah. I guess if all the men live in one house, it's going to be a big house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fortress.
Yeah. I don't think like. The other thing was apparently tunnels were huge. Like they had tunnels everywhere, and women had like sod houses, which I guess is for cutting blocks of dirt. I guess, but I don't know why the women specifically. It's like, this is my sod house. Like this is where we stick all the women in their dirt, and so they would put like tunnels in their sod houses so you could sneak out of the town and you could sneak between buildings, and it was weird. Like I think a bit of tactics would have gone a long way in there, but like it was a lot of defensive plays, right?
Well, yeah. So there's two things that a lot of tactics goes a lot of ways. So part of it could have been that they weren't actually trying to annihilate each other. I don't know.
They definitely were trying to annihilate each other. Yeah.
So then on top of that, you don't think about, like we said, we have so much knowledge. Like we read books of fiction.
Yeah.
Like you drop a Napoleon in there.
Yeah.
Or even you drop a U in there.
Yeah.
And you're convinced that the Yukoners are evil and you're on the side of the Inuit.
Yeah.
And you can talk with them. Let's say you can understand them.
They're in the Yupik, I guess, were the non-Yukoners. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can actually speak with them.
Yeah.
And
I'm here to save you.
What does he say? They trust you as well. You're a weird...
You know the Inuit have a story about how, like, the devil is, like, a white person? Like
that's blonde?
I don't know about that, but, like, this woman had sex with a bunch of dogs, and then her children were all white people, and they're, like, demons. Like, the Inuit, when they saw white people, they're like, wait, these are the demons from the legends. So, if I just dropped in the middle of there, I would be in a bit of trouble, possibly. But
well, they realize they need the devil to help them win.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
That's weird, actually. I have a friend's family. They're native.
Yeah.
And they're all platinum blonde with white skin from elementary school. And they're, like, native as native could be. And that's just apparently, like, that happened every once in a while in, like, certain ones of groups up here.
But the Inuit are different, right?
Yeah.
Like, the Inuit aren't even Native Americans.
Yeah.
Right. Like, they're not. They're Arctic people.
Yeah.
They live in Greenland and Alaska and Canada. Like, they live in the Arctic. It's a different place. Yeah.
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 But anyways,
and they probably met with the Vikings. So, of course, the white people are devils.
Yeah. So they trust you with all that stuff.
Yeah.
You probably could do some things, like, outside the box thinking, like IQ tests.
Yeah.
If we look at IQ systems in the past and how it has changed over time, creative thinking is relatively modern.
Yeah.
And so...
Although that said, the reason the war started, very creative. So there was a serial killer. He was a Yukoner, I believe. He was a Yukoner serial killer. So he went to... So they had this trio of villages. They were called the Triangle Villages.
Yeah.
Actually, no, sorry. It wasn't a trio of villages. There's 3 main villages, but there's a bunch of villages in a sort of triangular area.
Yeah.
So they're called the Triangle Villages. And so this Yukoner went and lived with them for a while, and he was a seal hunter. So in seal hunting, I guess you always go out with like another person, and you I don't know if you just go out together so you have like a buddy, or if you go so one person kills the seal, one person brings it back. I don't know why, but you'd always go out in pairs, right? And so they go out in their kayaks, they kill seals, and then his partners. This is the part I also don't get. Maybe this is where they are lacking creative thinking. He'd always come back alone.
Yeah.
He'd always be like, "Oh yeah, my partner drowned at sea." It's like, do you at some point go, Like, I don't know how many times this happened. Maybe it was only 2 or 3 times. Like, oh man, this guy's bad luck, but we'll do it this time. Like, he loses 2 partners at sea. I can trust him all. I'm not going with him. Like, he's cursed. I'm not going with this guy, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, so he's the serial killer. And But his creativity was how he would kill the people, because there was no evidence that he had done it, really. So he sharpened his kayak blades. And so what he would do is he would wait until his partner got a seal and was pulling it onto their boat. And then he'd boat up beside them, and he'd slide his kayak paddle underneath their kayak and like cut out the bottom.
Yeah.
So the kayak would fill with water, and they would just get pulled to the bottom. And then he'd grab the seal and he'd take it back for himself. And so that's creative.
Yeah.
But so they had a little bit of creativity going.
Yeah.
But I don't really understand why people weren't immediately like, okay, you lost 2 partners, something's up. Like, you lose 1, it's always a tragedy. You lose 2, you're immediately...
Well, let's say that seal hunting is a risky business.
Yeah.
And so only the best people go and seal hunt.
And he doesn't kill every single person he goes
Doesn't kill every single person.
Yeah.
Like, he if he's clever, he, like, does every once in a while.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes there's not an opportunity to kill someone. Yeah. It's already dangerous, so there's a 10% chance of... Let's not say 10. Let's say a 1% chance.
Yeah. So you're already expecting a few losses.
Yeah. Also, this guy is guaranteed to come back with a seal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, his partners disappear more often than they should, but this guy brings you food.
Yeah, he's a great hunter.
Yeah, he's a very good hunter. Despite him losing a partner, he still brings back a seal.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, oh, well, it's a tragedy, but what can you do? And we like this guy anyways because he brought back a seal.
Yeah. And so what they did, actually, was they saw... Because I guess each kayak has its own ribbing pattern, right? On the bottom. And they saw that every time he brought back a seal, it would have 2 different ribbing patterns on it. Like, it had been in one boat, and then it was in another boat.
Yeah.
And so they're like, wait a minute, this guy is, like... He's taking someone else's seals. And his partners always die. And then one guy he went out with was a little suspicious. So this guy, at least, he's like, he keeps losing partners. So this guy was a little suspicious. So every time he boated near him, he would boat away from him.
Yeah.
And then one time... he, like, slid his paddle against the other guy's paddle, and he's like, whoa, that paddle's sharp. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
And so he avoided him, and then he went back to the town, and he's like, yeah, something's up with this guy. I don't know what, but something's up with him. And then they suddenly showed that the Inuit were actually British all along, and they chased him out of town in the most passive-aggressive way possible, where he needed a new kayak, and they're like, yeah, we'll help you build your kayak. So they pulled the skin over the frame, and they tightened the frame, and then, okay, it's as tight as it can be, good. And then they tightened it some more, and they cracked the frame. And then they tightened it some more and, like, crushed the boat. And then they, like, rolled the boat over with him in it. And he was like, okay, yeah. And he ran out of town. And then he ran back to the Yukon. Not the Yukon. This is in Alaska. It's confusing. Yeah. But he ran back to the Yukoners and he said, hey, they're trying to kill me. We got to get ready for war. And thus a 700-year war began.
So another thing about him being a serial killer.
Yeah.
He maybe only killed 3 people.
Yeah, or 2.
But the story can be exaggerated or built over
Well, the
time.
fact that this started a 700-year war... I think there was other tensions going on.
Yes.
Like, that's crazy. Like,
yeah.
You just go to the police of the Yukoners and you say, hey, we got a serial killer. You deal with,
Yeah, well, it's Princess Bride. He wanted to kill her to start a war.
Yeah. But it's another thing. This is true of most cultures, I would say. But I think the First Nations seem to do it, like here specifically, seem to do this more than most. It's like they're like coastal people in general. Yeah. Super revenge based for whatever reason.
Yeah.
They seem to be very, very revenge based. And I think that leads to whenever you talk about the history of a war, it always has to be the other guy's fault.
Yeah.
Like in that story, right? This guy was a serial killer, but in his story, he said they're trying to kill us. Like he ran back home and said they're trying to kill us, so we need to get ready for war. So both of them are like, oh yeah, it's the other guy's fault. So I think that might also be part of it, where they're just looking for an excuse to get revenge, to start fighting. There's a story around here, I don't know if I ever told you it, of, this was in the 1800s. These First Nation people found some either abandoned tins, or they stole the tins, or whatever it might have been. Yeah. They're full of white powder. And they had just learned about bannock. And so they're like, oh, this is baking powder, this is awesome. So they went and they made bannock, and they ate it, and they died because it was...
Lie?
No, it was either paint or arsenic.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it might have been paint powder, but or it might have been the same thing. Really.
Well, if it's white paint, it's going to be lead paint.
Yeah, so it might have been like lead paint. It might have been arsenic. It was something like that, like rat poison, something like that. So they died, and so then the people, like the survivors of that event that saw them all die, was like, okay, wow, the I don't know what they would have called them, the Europeans or the white people or whatever. I've never really liked the whole using skin color to denote differences between people. I'd much rather use the culture, but
it would have been.
But they might have considered it the white
Californians mostly.
Oh, like during the gold rush, yeah, like the Americans or.
It would have been It would have been like the population in the 1800s would have been Canadians.
Yeah.
Because they would have been French and British colonists who'd been there long enough to actually move. So it would have been Canadians, British and French trappers, Métis, and Californians would have been the...
But I think the main point is that the group would have been the foreign European types with a different technology.
Yeah, the foreign Europeans.
Yeah, so the white people, I guess we could say. Yeah. But yeah, it probably, like you said, it would be Californians and whatnot.
Yeah.
But, so...
I was just trying to go, like, which group would be up here at the time.
No, I agree with you, yeah. But I'm just... From the First Nation point of view, they'd probably be like, it was the white people technology, right? So what they did was they thought, we need to get revenge. So they went out and they just murdered some random like caravan of like 4 or 5 people to get revenge. Like, you took this, maybe it was abandoned and nobody wanted it. That was your fault, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not this random, but the idea was, well, some of our people died and therefore some of your people have to die. Even like that was the mindset of at least that group of people, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a violent perpetuating mindset.
Yeah.
Whatever that cultural... And I think it is like, I wonder if you did a survey of coastal people around the world, if it was like, you have so much resources, you're like, that's all you just care about status more than anything? Or...
Well, so the thing is, the British monks were coastal people, and they constantly got the snot beaten out of them by Vikings.
Yeah, but they're British, so they were getting their revenge by being passive-aggressive and holier than thou. I've been reading Nietzsche, and he does not like the British in some way. like he's like, what was it? They're so uncreative that they're the most religious group in Europe because they need religion to stay moral because they're so uncreative or something like that. Actually, I do want to talk about Nietzsche, but we can talk about it later.
No. This is a good opportunity to talk about Nietzsche. I had some questions about him for you.
Okay. I'll see what I can do. Like, Nietzsche, I think, is a very complicated guy. Like, that's and I think he's also... I was thinking if I did a philosophy course, I'm not sure how I would do it because you need such a big grounding to do philosophy that it's kind of good as it is. Like, you did philosophy in school. Like,
I did the philosophy of ethics.
That's like first year philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of need that background just to get your foot in philosophy with like, okay, this is utilitarianism, this is deontology, this, right? But I would almost want like halfway through the semester, you just stop and you're like, all right, time to read Nietzsche. Because Nietzsche throws it all out the window. And I think it's really interesting. Like he really makes you think, even if you disagree with him. Yeah. He tells you there's another way. You don't have to follow all these rules and this morality and this legalistic, scientific. That was his biggest problem. He says Bacon was the murderer of philosophy because Bacon invented the scientific method, right? Yeah. And so he said
this is perfect actually for what I want to discuss. So he was like,
the British are the least philosophical people on earth. Yeah. Was his was Nietzsche's sort of complaint with the British, but I think Nietzsche would be really interesting to just throw in as like a middle of the semester type thing, or maybe second year you just start with Nietzsche. Maybe that's what they do. I never did second year philosophy.
So the 4 horsemen of atheism. Yeah. Richard Dawkins. Yeah. I listened to an interview he did with another guy recently. The guy he's doing an interview with is also an atheist. It was Andrew Gold. And one of the things I realized...
He's that neo-Nazi, right?
Yeah, he's Jewish.
No, but I think I heard someone say Andrew Gold was like some sort of neo-Nazi, which was funny. Yes.
So, he's an anti-cult Jewish man. Yeah. So, in their interview, I realized that Richard Dawkins, I really don't like how he talks. Like, his accent's fine. Yeah. When he talks about certain subjects... But you have to... I'm very... He's kind of it's more than that. It's also the substance...
Although he's a good speaker.
He's a good speaker. It's the substance of how he talks, though. Yeah. He doesn't explore ideas. He doesn't... and it might be the personality he's built up for himself. But he doesn't have... Not fun. He doesn't dance.
Well, I think what's going on with him... That's the exact... criticism of British people Nietzsche had. Like, he literally said they don't dance. Yeah. Like, Nietzsche's, like, word for word, Nietzsche was like, British people don't dance, basically.
Yeah. And him talking with Jordan Peterson is the most hilarious thing, actually. Yeah. So Richard Dawkins has a problem where he cannot see the forest for the trees. And so they had a conversation where Jordan Peterson was saying dragons are real. Yeah. Do you know about this?
No.
People are making fun of Jordan Peterson because Jordan Peterson believes in dragons. Jordan Peterson says dragons are real.
Yeah.
If you listen to what Jordan Peterson is saying, yes, dragons are real. He doesn't mean there's like a dragon in the forest.
Yeah.
It's you don't go into the forest because there's a dragon. But you can get treasure from the dragon. He's talking about they are so metaphorically powerful that they are real. But the problem with Jordan Peterson, I think he partly has this problem, not as bad as Richard Dawkins, is he has the opposite. He can't see the trees for the forest. And I actually think that's it was so fresh that like not many people had experienced this. But I think that that's actually a problem a lot of people have with Jordan Peterson. Is he's so focused on the forest, because everyone's ignored forests to this point, that he's starting to tick people off because he's not talking about the trees. But Richard Dawkins refuses to talk about the forest, and that's what drives me nuts about him.
I think what they're both doing is actually the same thing, and I think they're...
Well, it is the same thing, it's just different ways.
Yeah, but I think what they're doing is they're afraid of getting got with a god shit, right? It's like if Jordan Peterson says, okay, I don't believe Jesus actually resurrected, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't actually believe that happened. I believe it on a spiritual level, and I believe it's true on some higher level, and that truth is transcendent within human nature. If that is what he believes. Like, maybe he does believe it actually happened, right? But if he says something like that, then people are like, oh, so you don't actually believe in God. Got you, right?
Yeah.
And same with Dawkins, where if you say to him, okay, so you think truth is the highest or ideal, which he does, right? He thinks the seeking of truth is what you should do, right? It's like, okay, why? It's like, what gives you that impulse to truth? Yeah. And that's a room for God right there, right? But he won't concede that, because then he'll be giving, oh, well, maybe God could exist. He doesn't want to give that ground, right? Which is why I think someone like Stephen Fry is kind of the perfect synthesis there, because he is an atheist, but he completely gives ground to like, oh yeah, God was amazing, God did all this.
Well, I think actually Sargon,
Sargon
in his development is one of the best atheists out there. In one of my favorite things, he talks about like this is your God-given right. This is God's design.
Yeah,
like this is what God wants you to do. This he talks about it in that spiritual way, and it almost harkens back interestingly to our conversation about the Chad monarchists versus the
well, that's one of the reasons I want to talk about Nietzsche, because he agrees with you on a lot of things to do with that.
Well, I took the meme image.
Yeah.
I made the Virgin Blonde.
Yeah.
I changed one of his pieces of text and left everything. It's the Chad walk versus the Virgin walk. Like, that's what the meme was originally. I changed everything about the monarchist, like all of his lines.
Yeah.
But I almost left the Virgin like what he was, of like the slumped shoulders, like all the things. But on that, it's interesting. So like, I've listened to people's arguments of why a king is better, and they have like some good arguments, they have some good points, but there's counter arguments, there's various different things about them. Don't want to get into that. What we did in our conversation, which I thought was interesting, is I said my points, and you actually countered them quite well, of saying, this happens on the monarchy side too, and this happens on that side.
Yeah.
And part of it is the spirit of the thing, which is, I think, very important. And that's my problem with Dawkins, which, it's bizarre to me, is he invented the meme.
Yeah.
He invented and in his book, The Selfish Gene, he actually explains it so well. And it's like, this guy has like all the pieces of the puzzle.
You know that Jordan Peterson is a huge Dawkins fan, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's like a fanboy for Dawkins.
Yeah, exactly.
Gets all, like, goo-goo-eyed when he sees him because of the meme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Jordan Peterson thinks the meme is the most brilliant thing anyone's ever done.
The Selfish Gene is brilliant. Like, as I say, Dawkins has all the puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
And he actually assembled the puzzle, but he didn't put any of the pieces together.
Yeah.
That is what it feels like when you listen to him.
Well, I think his favorite song is The Lost Chord, which is a religious song, right? About going to heaven. And he loves Christian churches. He loves Christian music. He loves the Bible. He thinks it's a great work of, like, I think...
Like, I don't even need Dawkins to be not an atheist.
Yeah.
Like, he can keep being an atheist. And he doesn't need to change. It's just,
I think he's just been fighting Christianity for, like, almost 80 years. And he doesn't want to give any ground, right?
Well, like, the other horseman, there's that one guy who...
Christopher...
there's the one guy that no one really knows about.
Sam Harris?
No.
No.
No, people know about Sam Harris. I'll get to Sam Harris.
Okay. Well, the four are Dawkins, Stephen Fry, Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris, aren't they?
No, it wasn't Christopher Hitchens. It was a different guy.
I thought it was Hitchens.
No, all of them really liked Hitchens, but he wasn't one of the horsemen.
Oh.
It was a different guy he just like wrote a whole bunch of stuff and gives speeches, but he's not as famous as the other three. But so Stephen Fry has a really good sense of humor.
Yeah.
And
he's probably the smartest person on earth. He's a genius.
Yeah, he's he did a bit of Fry and Laurier, which is a great show.
Oh yeah, with Hugh Laurier.
Yeah. Hugh Laurier. Like the sense of humor they have. So there's this one sketch where Fry basically had to hit Laurier.
Yeah.
And he hit him harder and harder throughout the show. And the final time he hit him, Hugh Laurier just like crumpled around it. And then he like continued trying to do the sketch. And he was like, "That was too hard." And Strauss like, "Oh, continue the sketch." "No, that was too hard." And then Laura's like, "Oh, Schnookums upset." And he just like started mocking about hitting him too hard. And that is funny. But it's the one thing about Stephen Fry that can turn people off is he's smug.
Yeah.
And like he's very smart. He has a right to be smug, but his smugness can turn people off of him.
I don't even know if he's smug. I think that's just the way he sounds in a way.
Yeah. But so the other guy, I forgot his name, Sam Harris.
Yeah.
Now
he's smug.
He's a nut job.
Yeah.
I like him battling Christianity and religion for long. So I think that actually like cracked his brain. Like so for Richard Dawkins, I think he's become super defensive against it, and his life is partly based around being defensive, and he's kind of stuck in his way on it. Yeah. And he doesn't allow himself to have creativity in certain areas because of that, which is a shame. Because he's a very creative man, I think. He literally doesn't let himself have certain aspects of life. Yeah. But man, the other guy, he's like just fell off a bridge or something. Sam Harris is just...
So Nietzsche believed that democracy was about being gregarious, right? So it's about getting along with other people so that you're all equal before God and you get along with other people. And in order to do so, the qualities in a man, such as courage, viciousness, bravery, duplicity, things that let you fight against enemies, right, are negative because you don't want to be fighting your neighbor. And so for a democracy to work, you have to give up those virtues, and you instead have to become... you have to get rid of all the dangerous aspects of yourself. You have to sand all the rough edges. And...
You have to become a soy jack.
Well, basically. Because what happens is you get rid of everything... You get rid of your urge to kill your neighbor and your urge to...
Maybe not a soy jack. You have to become a soy boy.
You get rid of your urge to murder your neighbor and to fight and conquer land and become a leader among men, right? Yeah. So you get rid of that. But then your words become dangerous. There's always another danger, right? Yeah. So now... If your words cause division between each other or you get in an argument with someone or a fight, then okay, so you need to change language so that the words aren't dangerous. And the problem is there's always going to be another danger that will arise as a result of getting rid of the previous danger. Because there will always be some threat to the stability, so you have to get rid of that constantly. And he said, so the goal of a democracy is to eliminate suffering. And he thinks that's a terrible goal because the real goal should be to overcome suffering, to become strong enough that you overcome suffering. Yeah. And... So he believed that democracy essentially led to the elimination of hierarchy and to socialism. Or, alternatively, what democracy could do, this was written in like 1885, right? So in the case of the Germans, you have this very smart, strong people, right? Yeah. So you get them all to be gregarious. So they're all very social. They're very industrious. Nietzsche believed there was sort of three states of man. There was industry, nobility...
And German.
And military. No. There's industry, nobility, and... military. Yeah. And he thinks democracy is industrious. Yeah. And he thinks the problem with industrious people is to be industrious, you have to get along with others, right? Yeah. Which means you have a society of everyone getting along. They're all gregarious. They don't fight back. They all get along. Yeah. They can produce like crazy because they're industrious. And they listen to what they're told to do because that's how you make your machines run smoothly, right? Which means if you have a figure come along who can tell them what to do, they suddenly have a perfect army that can make them anything. Yeah. Because you have... Suddenly, everyone will listen to you without question. They won't be busy fighting you for a position because you're the leader. And everyone still desperately wants a leader in their heart.
Basically the story of Demolition Man in some ways.
I'll take your word for it. It's been a long time since I saw Sargon's review of it.
Yeah.
But and they'll be super industrious, so they can just crank out machines of war and So that was Hitler, right? That was and this was written way before Hitler came to power. But that was Nietzsche's concern with democracies. It leads to either socialism or dictatorship, tyranny. And he believed that the cause of democracy, the thing that made everyone soy and weak and feminine and got rid of their masculine power, was Christianity.
Yeah. Huh.
And so all the stuff he talks about, it's the same complaints nowadays people call it woke, right? They say, oh, this is woke, this is... Nietzsche was complaining about the exact same stuff over 100 years ago. But he was blaming Christianity.
You know that Teal'c is a professor, right?
No, I didn't.
He's like a lecturer in a university.
Oh.
That's partly why he's kept himself anonymous. So he's made videos, still makes them, hasn't had one recently, on like Rumble and Aussie and other things. He posted a bunch to YouTube recently.
Yeah.
And one of his videos was on Christianity. And he was saying that he was actually talking about how Christianity is a weak religion.
Yeah.
But why there was crusaders and the great kings like Charlemagne is because they weren't really Christian. They were pagans who had Christianity at the same time. But they still believed in Odin and Woden and the war gods and being a warrior priest and warrior monks and doing like the pagan stuff. And it's basically the slow erasure of the pagan from Christianity has weakened it.
Yeah, I could see that. I think Nietzsche would probably agree with that. Because he thinks Christianity was all about weakness and preventing suffering and looking after people and be like, oh, dear, let me help you, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And instead of glorifying strength and victory. And so he thinks Christianity naturally leads to democracy, and democracy naturally leads to weak men, tyranny, and socialism.
Demolition Man is definitely the tyranny of the weak man. Basically, a guy comes back from being frozen in ice.
Yeah.
And he's a criminal.
Yeah.
And so there's this brilliant scene where he's doing a bunch of crimes, and the police are trying to arrest him. And so there's like 20 police officers, and they're surrounding them. They have these stun batons. And they take out this guide, and it's the guide of how to arrest someone. And it says, ask them to surrender. And so, put down your weapons and surrender. And he looks at them. What? Put down your weapons and surrender. No. So if they say no, ask them again louder. And they go through this checklist. And they get to the bottom, and it's like, and they don't know what to do. And so the villain's, here, let me show you what to do. And he attacks one of them. And then they're like, what? He did violence. It's like, now you attack me. I'm like, what? You attack me. And so the police officers attack him, and they're uncertain about it, and they're bad. And he beats them all up, and they get more and more confident in trying to attack him. But they just can't even comprehend, like, a violent criminal not even, surrendering when they have him surrounded. It's like, you're under arrest. You're going to prison. And he demolishes them, and their society cannot comprehend this violent man.
And it's something that I've been...
And he can basically, like, take over the whole society because
they have nothing to stop him with.
Yeah.
And they're all about being agreeable.
And so they unfreeze a police officer from the past who's Demolition Man to deal with him.
Right.
But they're also scared of Demolition Man because he's also violent and weird and doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah, and that's the... that is something Nietzsche talks about. And the other thing Nietzsche talks about with that is he says, because they are so weak and they don't follow what their instinct tells them to do, like to conquer, to be strong, they need to wear costumes in order to feel powerful, right? And so you choose a costume. So you might choose, for instance, as your costume, fancy balls and outfits and like Rococo furniture, or you might choose nationalism, like I am a German, I am a German, and he's like, Germany has existed for like almost no time at all. You're not a German. That you can't just be a German. Like you are you. You aren't a German. German is just a costume you're wearing to make you feel something. And so I have no idea why the Nazis liked him, because he, like, everything he says is like mocking the Nazis like 80 years before the Nazis existed.
Okay.
Or like 60 years before the Nazis existed.
So I'm going to use the Old Testament. The Old Testament is the Jewish book.
Yeah.
It's their stories. I'm going to use the Old Testament to justify the Holocaust.
Okay.
This is just this, like, how you can take something to justify it. So there's a story in the Old Testament, which is this king has an advisor. You've heard the story a lot. Yeah. The king has an advisor who's not a very good man.
Yeah.
And the king has a wife, and she's Jewish. And the advisor doesn't like the Jewish people. And the king's wife's uncle basically offends him.
Yeah.
And so he says to the king, we should have a day, because like people don't like the Jews. Let's have a holiday or a day where the people rise up, seize Jewish property, and kill the Jews.
It's the purge.
Basically, like, purge them. And the king says, okay, we will do this. And once the king says we'll do something as law, he can't actually reverse it.
Yeah.
And then, very much simplify it.
Yeah.
His wife basically goes, oh no, we can't do this because I'm Jewish. And the king's like, whoa, shoot, what do we do? But she's clever, and her uncle's clever, and they have grace of God.
Yeah.
And so she says, on this day, say another law, that the neighbors of the Jews and them themselves can unite together and fight back for themselves. And so basically have a miniature war where they're allowed to fight for themselves.
Yeah.
And so then the story proceeds where on that day where people rise up to attack the Jews have basically more people on their side. They murder all the people who want to kill them, then they steal all their stuff of the dead people and become more rich from it.
Yeah.
So they are allowed to defend themselves. And by God's grace, if they are proven to be the more liked and greater people who can gather more allies to them, then the Holocaust should be no problem for their people.
Right. Which is kind of Hitler's argument that the person who is moral in a conflict is whoever wins.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm using that justification from that story.
Yeah.
Now, is that the moral of the story? I don't know, but I very lightly twisted it into...
And that is literally what Hitler believed about uprisings. He thought that it was your duty to rebel against tyranny, and that if you won, that proved that you were moral.
And, I mean, saying that there are so many stories from the Old Testament you could use to say...
Nietzsche actually...
Bad, but...
I don't quite understand this because I wasn't alive at the time, right? But Nietzsche is talking about the Jews in Europe, and he says Germans hate the Jews, but Germany is super anti-Semitic. Even the people that decry anti-Semitism, most people in Germany will decry anti-Semitism. They'll say, oh no, you shouldn't be anti-Semitic, it's bad. But they don't do it because they like the Jews. They do it because they don't want to be racist, basically. But anti-Semitic at the time, right? But they still agree with the idea that the Jews should be gotten rid of. It's just they don't agree with racism. So he says, but the reason that Germany, unlike the rest of Europe, has a unique problem with the Jews is because Germany's culture is so weak that the Jews haven't assimilated into the rest of Germany. Like in the UK, they're not a problem at all. They've just absorbed all the Jews. But here, what we could do with them, we could take these people who are geniuses with money and we could put them in charge of everything and we'll be rich. We could take their... He also loves the Jewish faith. He's like, this is a religion of infinite punishment and infinite power and reward. These are people that we need to learn from and take their barbarism into us. And he says, there's people, they say we need to shut down the borders to stop all the Jews coming in because there's way too many Jews. But that doesn't solve the problem of the Jews. That's just shutting down the border. You need to instead become more powerful than the Jews in order to... he talks about things in really weird terms. Like, for example, race mixing. So he says, if you mix races... it will drive you crazy. The children will be crazy because they'll have two natures competing within them.
Do you know what's terrifying about that?
What?
This is just weird, actual biology sort of, not proving that point, but supporting it, is so, bone marrow transplants.
Yeah.
Mixed race children cannot give a bone marrow transplant to either their parents cannot give a bone marrow transplant to them.
No.
But in non-race mixed, you can do that. But it's the either or. It actually doesn't work anymore.
That's interesting. And I wonder how many generations that lasts. Because I was reading that, now archaeologists, of course, are always politically motivated, but I was reading that the problem with a lot of archaeological assumptions made by non-archaeologists is you'll look at the Olmec statues, right? Yeah. You'll see these African men, right? It looks like these African men. Or you'll find a skull. There was a 9,000-year-old skull found in Washington, and it looked like a Caucasian man. Yeah. And they're like, oh, so Caucasians were here first. But the problem is that phenotypes can change in one generation. So if you so the guy that proved this, Boaz was his name. He went through New York. He measured the skulls of 18,000 people, and he was like, okay, so first generation immigrants, huge variety of skulls, right? Yeah. Second generation, their skulls are all the same shape. Huh. Just by living in New York for one generation, they're all faces all look the same basically. And you can think about that take Candace Owens, right? Yeah. Compare her face to those Olmec statues, let's say. Yeah. She does not look like an African man. Well, I mean, obviously. But she doesn't look like African woman in quotation marks, right? She looks like an American.
Well, even more related to me, I have friends whose families came from China.
Yeah.
They're so Chinese that their parents can barely speak English.
Yeah.
And you look at these two guys. They look obviously Asian.
Yeah.
They're brothers. But you compare them to their parents, they look like...
Yeah, it's like they have the Asian color palette on a Canadian body.
Well, they even their skeleton and like stature, like the structure is like an Asian structure, but they're a Canadian Asian. Like you look at their parents are Chinese Asian. These guys are Asian Canadians.
Have you ever looked at like the old photos of like native people, like from like the 1800s or whatever? And they look like these rough, like they've got like knife-like features. They're very jagged. They're very sharp. And or like the Inuit especially, they're not sharp. They're like round people. They've got like these eyes that look like tiny little lines. They look like rock, right? And they've got like, but I have some Inuit friends, and they don't look like that at all. Like it's diet and environment is huge in how you look.
Definitely.
So it really changes you. But so the bone marrow, I don't know. Like I wonder, because they claim there's no such thing as race in the archaeology book I was reading, which I'm like, okay, you claim that, but if I go to you and I tell you that I am descended from, like a Kenyan warlord, you're going to tell me, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
So obviously there's something, right? So I don't think you can say... Now, what they might mean is there was an idea in archaeology that there was 4 races. There was Mongoloids, Negroes, Caucasians, and Indians, I think were the... Or no, Indians were Mongoloids, I think, possibly. So maybe there's only 3 races. Oh, Asians. No, they are Mongoloids as well. Maybe the Indians were a 4th race.
Would it be Norse? Would it be the white?
The Caucasians were...
Well, because there's Caucasians and then there was the white people, actually. Like, they were called white.
No, so the idea was, when Noah landed on Mount Sinai, and his sons went out in every direction, right? They each founded...
But would one of them be, like, the First Nations group? Was that?
Yeah, that might have been one. Like the Eastern First Nations. Yeah. Yeah, that could be. Yeah. So there could be 4. So it could be the First Nations, the Mongoloids, the Negroes, and the Caucasians. Yeah. And the idea was that each son was the head of one of those groups of people.
Okay.
And what their claim was, because the Caucasus are where Mount Sinai is, right? Yeah. So the idea was that Caucasians, like the Armenians, the Turks, and by extension Indians, like actual Indians, like Hindu, and Europeans, they as Caucasians strayed the least distance from Mount Sinai, so they are what the original people looked like.
Wait, Noah landed on Mount Sinai?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, just like in Turkey. Yeah.
Sorry, but that's the mountain that Moses went to.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong then. I think it was Sinai. Yeah.
Sinai is like the mountain that God was living in.
Yeah. Well, maybe he took up residence after. Yeah. In that range somewhere, anyways.
Yeah.
Moses did land in Armenia, right?
Yeah.
But Armenia doesn't exist right now, so. Which doesn't really make sense to me, right? Because the one son stayed closest to the mountain, right? Let's say. But they're the same generation as the other 3 sons.
Yeah.
So why is like the black son any less different from original humans than the guy that stayed near the mountain, right? Like,
is that the justification?
Well, the idea was that the Caucasians had strayed the least from the original look of humans. Because they stayed closest to the mountain. But it's like, but they're all brothers. Like, how does that make any sense?
Not really.
I guess the theory would be that environment changes your appearance. And so it could be that, like, the Mongoloids and the Negroes and the Indians, I think they called them possibly, which is confusing because the Hindus are Caucasian, but the Indians, who are the First Nations, their environment changed. Because there was this idea that, for instance, during one of the first Olympics that the first Olympics that the United States competed in, the Europeans were saying that the Americans had become savage because of their environment. Like, their land had made them weak and un-European, and that they were savage, and they might be good at... They became these hyper-specialized machines. They might be good at, like, one sport, but you couldn't have a true Olympian that was good at a bunch of sports. And so then the Americans sent a guy... I can't remember his name now. He was a First Nation guy.
Yeah.
So they sent him, so they're like, oh yeah, no, we're Americans. Here's an American, like a pure American. And they're like, you're not even real Americans. You're just Europeans in America. So not only are you hyper-specialized and you've lost the European edge, but you're not even real Americans. You're just pretending to be Americans. So, okay, we'll send a First Nation guy. And so during the Olympics, it was in Norway, and Norway was like... Sorry, it was in Sweden. And the Swedes were like, we're going to show that we're the best at everything. We're going to have a decathlon. So there's 10 events, right?
Yeah.
And so when you win a decathlon, what you do is you get like second place, third place, first, fourth. You get add up the points, you have first place, right?
Yeah.
This guy didn't get the message. He got first in like all but one event.
Yeah.
And then, so he won the decathlon. And then all the athletes went to rest for like the next event. But he was like, no, I signed up for everything. So then he did the sprint. Then he did the pentathlon. And he won all of these as well. Yeah. So he had the most gold medals of any Olympian until...
Canadian?
Until maybe Michael Phelps or something came along. Like, he was the most medaled Olympian at modern Olympics.
Yeah.
And but they actually revoked his medals from him a few years later, which was kind of sad. Because he was also a professional football player. And if you get paid to do sports, you can't participate in the Olympics or something, which is a stupid rule. And I don't know if they still have that or not, but you can't make money doing... So they wrote... But when he... apparently, now the story might be apocryphal, but... The king had his own medal. It wasn't an Olympic medal. Yeah. But he just had a medal he wanted to give out. And so he went to this guy and he was like, you, son, are the best athlete I have ever seen. Like, you're the best athlete on earth. Yeah. And this guy took it. He's like, thanks, king. And he was actually the founder of the NFL.
Oh.
The National Football League.
Huh.
In the States.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. Quite poor his whole life, weirdly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like...
Churchill was quite poor most of his life.
It's like these people, like the great... I guess so was Diogenes.
You know what's really weird about Churchill, though? He was quite poor, but he lived quite wealthily. As in, he was in constant debt, constantly struggling with money, because he liked having nice things.
Right.
But he didn't have much money until much later in his life when people started reading his treaties.
Right. Also,
man, Churchill's an insane life. If you like, do you know about his failure?
Which failure?
Churchill was a war journalist during like the Boer Wars and stuff, and he really liked horses, so he like did cavalry officer stuff. And he got into politics later on in his life, and during World War II, he was actually one of the war ministers. Sorry, World War I. He was one of the war ministers, and he had the strategy for moving boats around near Istanbul. Like there's this big boat battle.
Yeah.
And he failed miserably. And hundreds of British soldiers died. A bunch of boats sunk.
Oh.
And so, he resigned. And he joined the British soldiers in World War I into the trenches. Basically, to go back. That was his penance. Was rejoin the soldiers as an older man who had become a politician.
Right.
And that was part of the reason why people liked him so much.
Because he made up for his mistakes. He took ownership for them.
Yeah.
He went, yeah, no, that's likable. He's a bit of a tyrant in the end, I guess, but but he might have needed to be. So, so Nietzsche. So his opinion, he has this section where he just has an opinion on all the various peoples of Europe. And then he talks about how the Germans, with race mixing, he said that it'll cause, so you mix races, and it will cause you to be pulled with multiple natures in different directions. And this will cause you to be crazy and savage. But that can be a strength, because that is where artistic expression comes from, is being able to synthesize and overcome that and turn that into a strength. But it means that you can have this mess, but if you actually work towards strength. But the problem was, Germany was this horribly mixed race country that was also democratic, so they weren't allowing that strength to shine through. They were just... And he also hates the German language. Like, he complains about it the whole time. It's like, you can't express yourself, you can't have fun in German, it has no rhythm, you can't speak properly, you can't have a dancing, lilting conversation. And he actually really likes French people, which, lowers my opinion of Nietzsche a bit. But he talks about how Napoleon, he says, was the last true man of Europe. He was like someone that didn't actually serve someone else. Because his problem with everyone, he said, Europeans need to serve someone so badly, even kings will serve God. Like they feel like they need to be told what to do so much that even a king needs someone to tell him what to do. So but Napoleon was like the last man that actually stood on his own 2 feet and didn't have anyone tell him what to do.
So Nietzsche was in between World War I and II?
He was old by the time World War II happened. So I think like this is 1880. So this is like 40 years before World War II.
So, but he was
before World War I, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, before World War I.
Yeah.
Because there's
30 years before World War I.
The post World War I Germany, especially Berlin.
Yeah.
Apparently was a nightmare.
Yeah, Nietzsche was what were they called? Like, there's the Weimar Republic, right? But this was like the original, like, I guess like the Kaiserreich sort of.
Yeah, Weimar Germany.
Yeah.
Especially Weimar Berlin was considered to be the modern Sodom and Gomorrah by people at the time. It's, there's things I've learned about it, which are nightmarish. Like, it's the only place on Earth where you can have an experience with prostitutes, where you can copulate with the oldest and youngest people at the same time. And by that, they meant like an 8-year-old woman.
And like a child.
And a child.
Yeah.
And one of the other things, was sodomizing a male goose, then eating it. And that was like a thing that they would do in Weimar Germany. And so you could experience like everything that there was in life.
Ugh.
And it had to be a male goose so you could sodomize it. And it's like, and so Weimar Germany was like this horrible den of sins.
One of the interesting things about Nietzsche's criticism of German people is that almost all of his criticisms are the same criticisms Hitler has for Jews.
Huh.
Which I think kind of suggests that German people as a whole had good and bad sides.
Yeah.
And Hitler wanted all the good sides, and he wanted to offload the bad sides onto someone and be like... Because when Nietzsche talks about the Jews in like France and England, he says they're like English and French Jews. They're different. Yeah. German Jews are unique, and they have all these, like, the German characteristics. So I think Hitler might have been looking for a scapegoat to... I mean, that's revolutionary thought, I know. but I think that the German people might have had this flaw, not just the Jews, basically. Like, if Nietzsche and Hitler saw the same flaw, but it seems like it might have been a wider spread issue than just the Jews. Now, maybe Hitler thought the Jews were the source, and therefore you get rid of the source and the problem goes away on the people. But I think it's really interesting that nowadays we're complaining about the same things like wokeness, basically, right? That Nietzsche was complaining about. And the counterculture today against wokeness tends to be Christianity.
Yeah.
But Nietzsche said Christianity was the cause.
So I think this is a counterpoint, though. So the Christianity, do you know about what's happening currently to Christianity? So Protestantism, Catholicism, all the other sects are becoming less and less popular.
Yeah. Except
for one. There's one sect which people are joining more often, going to...
Orthodox?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Orthodox Church is becoming a lot more popular. And a lot of young men are going to the Orthodox Church. And I think the Orthodox Church is the most Russian of all the churches. And it's the most pagan, I think, of all of them, because they worship saints in the Orthodox Church. And a lot of saints are actually quite warlike.
Nietzsche also really liked the Russians, actually. He actually said, this was 1888, right? 1885. He said, I will predict that the two groups that will win in the end of all people are the Jews and the Russians, because both are willing to take the long view and just slowly make gains. Like he said, the Jews make their gains like the Russians built their empire. They don't do it all at once. They just slowly, little by little, take a little bit, and they never give it up.
So the Orthodox priests will bless missiles in Russia, and like your AK, you can get blessed by an Orthodox priest, and they're like Orthodox services. You go to a church and you go touch the like mummified body of a dead saint, and
I don't know if the Orthodox solves Nietzsche's problem of men are equal before God, though. I don't know, because what Nietzsche thought was that there was a natural order to things. There was the races, which shouldn't be mixed unless you want that creative danger, which he said danger is good. It's good to go for the danger. But then he said the classes also shouldn't be mixed, because that will also cause a sort of creative chaos, because people will not know their station, and you need to have a station. And then his section on women is the one that's going to haunt me, because I don't, like, it's the kind of thing, it's like, I don't agree with it at all, but he makes all these predictions that are right? Like, you know, and you're like, maybe he knows what he's talking about. But the problem with his prediction about women is that it's something that's very hard to judge if it's true or not, because it's something you need to look at from a long ways off over like 1,000-year lens sort of thing. But you can't hold 1,000 years of history on your head, even if you had 1,000 years of history to view. But what he said about women is that they are seeking in his time to do away with the mystery of themselves so that they may have equal rights to men. And so they're saying, no, we're just like you, and we have these faults and these failings, and we have these needs and these wants, and they're doing away with the mystery of themselves. And in doing so, they are trying to compete with men at men's own game. And they aren't fit for politics. They don't have the creativity for art. They don't have the intelligence for, like, this or that, right? But also, they're giving up that which allowed them to control men throughout all of history, and they're becoming the weakest they ever have in all of human history by seeking to enter like the political sphere and the works space. And
it's even relatively hard for us to judge this now, because so much of our values and judgment and where we place importance on things is what would traditionally be masculine.
Yeah.
And that is the viewpoint that has been perpetuated over time, is this is what's valuable, this is where we judge success and put things.
But that's interesting. Nietzsche is actually saying femininity is more powerful than masculinity. It allows you to control masculinity.
Yeah, exactly. But so what's, like, even we have a difficult conceptualizing, like, we feel like we're morally better than Nietzsche, and we feel like Nietzsche is wrong.
Yeah.
Because Nietzsche is right.
Well, yeah, Nietzsche is...
We feel Nietzsche is wrong because Nietzsche is right.
Well, it's funny because when Nietzsche says something like women are less creative or politically astute or intelligent, let's say, that isn't necessarily an insult, right?
Yeah.
That's saying that those are masculine characteristics and women are better at... And when he says something like women are better at deceiving and conniving and illusions, you're like, oh, well, that's bad. But Nietzsche... The book is called Beyond Good and Evil for a reason. Yeah. Nietzsche thought that all virtues and vices were actually suited to the individual.
Yeah, well, even if we look at... we have those words for them. Yeah. But, so, agape love. Yeah. Like, there's 4 different words of love. Like, if we go to Latin...
It's Greek that has the agape. And
sorry, if we go to Greek, there's 4 different words. Sometimes there's 8 different words for love. But, so, we might not even have words that we properly know how to use to describe feminine virtues. Yeah. And we might not have words to properly describe masculine virtues. What I'm going to say is I think we actually do have a masculocentric view on things. Yeah. And so going by that, I'm going to say that we have words to describe masculine virtue and women try to do masculine virtue. I don't think we have proper words for feminine virtue.
And Nietzsche would probably say, like, the solution isn't to tear down the patriarchy, right? It's to encapsulate it in a separate, like it's off to the side, right? They don't have to replace each other. You can have the two things being in parallel.
Well, let's look at one of the more famous women in history, the assassin.
Theodora.
Theodora. Yeah. So Theodora, if we think about her as a great ruler, like she's the great ruler in Civ 5. Yeah. And
she was a Constantine's...
Yes, she was Constantine's wife. Yeah. And Theodora, one of the things, like some of the things she did, like people say, oh, this is very politically savvy, but it's actually not politically savvy in a masculine view of things. It's politically savvy in a feminine view of things. Like, she wore purple. Yeah. And why that's a big deal is the emperor wore purple. Only the emperor wore purple. And so we were in Hagia Sophia. Yeah. And she did this thing which basically broke people's minds at the time. There's this area that the emperor basically had, in the Hagia Sophia, he actually had his own small house with like a kitchen, a bathroom, bedroom. And so he could leave from it and basically attend church perfectly. And so one day when they're supposed to be attending church, Theodora walked out wearing purple. Yeah. And people are like, what is she doing? He's the only person meant to be wearing purple. And her justification to her husband, like he disagreed with as well, is, I am the empress. I am you. Everything I do is for you and I am your hand. Yeah. And if I am you, then I wear purple. And the people must recognize this. That's like, we are the same voice, we are the same person. And that's weird. Yeah. And then when, like, she did that as a stunt, and then when the protesters were gathered and he wanted to abandon Constantinople, she said she wore purple again, basically, like, to prove this point. And she said, no, we are not leaving. We are going to fix this. This is how you're going to do it, husband. And then they gathered all the people in the hippodrome and slaughtered them. And also, poison, the weapon of women. Yeah. So Constantine has a political rival. He's thinking, okay, I can challenge this guy to a duel. Like Constantine, people like to call him a pushover because of Theodora. Yeah. I think she was actually super overbearing, and Constantine was like a pretty average run-of-the-mill emperor. Like, he wasn't terrible, he wasn't great, he's just... Yeah. He was a man of who he was. It's like, oh, what can I do to deal with this, like, political enemy? Like, I can discredit him, maybe. I can, like, just arrest him. Like, what can I do? And then the guy just ends up dead. Yeah. And it's problems dealt with.
Problem solved.
And
I also wonder, like, even if you took Nietzsche at his face value and you said women need to be this completely separate... He also said that women should be a man's possession in the sense that he has complete dominion and control over it. And so, like, in the terms of something you actually own, right? Like, he's not saying you're allowed to torture her, but she's like an object you own. Like, he said that's the way women should be viewed. But he also starts the whole thing with, this is my truth, which is interesting.
Was he ever married?
Well, I gotta wonder.
Did he have a mother?
I think he might have had, like, a mother and some sisters, which might also inform, like... I'm not sure if he had a father even, so it might have influenced his views on women a little bit. Like, he's just sick of them. But I think even if you took Nietzsche and said, okay, because he said this is my truth in that everyone has your own... Because his whole point of Beyond Good and Evil is that a virtue is only a virtue to the right person.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't use this example, but I could think of one like an assassin that goes up to every police officer and says, I'm an assassin. You're not a virtuous assassin. You're a moron. Right.
Yeah.
Like you should be stealthy and hide it. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of dumb example, but things shouldn't be taken to their extreme. He also talks about how virtue is a form of cowardice. Like you can just hide behind... He says, like, frankness and honesty is a way to avoid having to concern yourself with other people's feelings and think about them. It's just a way to... It's a way to be lazy and just... So...
a virtuous scorpion stings the toad.
Yeah, that's what it does, right? You listen to your nature,
Yeah.
But also, the virtuous toad doesn't give it the right. It's like, just, come on, don't do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think, at the same time, I wonder... Take someone like Hashput, I think was her name, the Egyptian pharaoh, who declared herself a man.
Yeah.
I think someone like that, I wonder if you could say, like we talked about the shield maidens before, right? Like, yeah, women have the women ways and men have the men ways, and men should be manly and women should be womanly, but that doesn't mean that some women aren't better suited to be men, in quotation marks.
Well, geisha in Japan.
Yeah. And some men are better suited to be women, in quotation marks.
Yeah.
Right? Like shield maidens and Hashput and... I don't know what the example of men being women would, like outside of like the ancient Assyrian example.
Oh, there's Japanese geisha.
Aren't geishas women?
There are. Yes, there are male geisha, which you know how the pharaoh looks like the pharaoh.
Yeah,
a geisha looks like a geisha.
Right. So like James or something when he's
also. Actually, here's a good example. Japanese theater performers are all men.
Right. Yeah.
And but a lot of them dressed like women because they needed to have that role.
Right. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're feminine, right? Yeah. They could still be very manly even if they're doing that. But like taking on a nurturing role or a mysterious... Like Louis XIV, you could say potentially was a female ruler, right?
Caligula? No, what's his name? That one emperor.
Oh, Elagabalus.
Yeah, Elagabalus.
Well, that's a bit different, right? Like what I'm saying is more like, it's not that you are... a woman, right? It's that you are taking the womanly role. Like, for example, Louis XIV, pinnacle of masculinity in one sense. But on the other hand, he was doing things very much about everyone needs to focus on fashion. Everyone needs to focus on appearance. Everyone needs to focus on gossip and what is said behind. That's very feminine in a sense, right? Yeah. Even though he is a great king.
So, I think one of our problems here where we're trying to find a male example is the... feminine woman. Like one of the virtuous feminine woman is the old matchmaker or the spinster or the witch in the wood.
Yeah.
You actually don't know about them.
Yeah, well that's
and so the man who takes on the feminine aspect, the herbalist, we could say, is you don't know him.
That's something that Dan Carlin talked about. He said his wife, I think, was complaining to him, like, why aren't any women like recorded in history doing great deeds? And he's like, because their deeds were behind the scenes. Yeah, you didn't often see them doing, like, if they that book I read on, he used to be Queen Elizabeth's butler. I assume he still works for the king, but he's the top butler on earth basically. And he said the best part about doing your job well is when no one knows you've done it. Yeah, like someone like him, you could say is a feminine. Now I think butlering doesn't have a very masculine, but it's the idea. But it's that same idea of like, he is the greatest butler ever because no one ever sees him do his job.
Yes, in Caiaphas Cain, Cain's always upset that Jurgen doesn't show up in the histories. Yeah. Jurgen's probably very pleased that he never shows up.
Yeah, because his goal is to be a support. He's not meant to be the front line guy.
I mean, the reason Jurgen doesn't show up is because he's disgusting and no one...
But Caiaphas Cain's job is to look good and smile for the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's... And there's an interesting thing, actually, even on that, where someone was looking at some stuff on Caiaphas Cain Reddit, and someone was saying the point of Caiaphas Cain is Caiaphas isn't the hero, Jurgen is. And Caiaphas is... And it's like, no, they are the heroes.
Yeah, they're a team.
They're a team. Like, Jurgen is more dangerous than Caiaphas. He has the melter.
Yeah.
He can stop psychics. He's an excellent shot. He has amazing reflexes. Caiaphas Cain is a very good duelist. He has very good instincts. And Caiaphas has very good plans. If Caiaphas' hand wasn't there to move Jurgen would just be a gunner. Like, he would just be gunner Jurgen. Like, Jurgen would never do all the great things of killing the demon and doing all that stuff without Caiaphas being there to steer him. And equally, he supports Caiaphas.
But the problem with one person having the job of being the person that talks to the press and get all the pictures taken, and one person not, is that the history books will look like there's only one person involved. Even though he's actually... It's not that Jurgen's being snubbed by any means. It's just his job isn't to be recorded.
Yeah.
Where Caiaphas' job is to be recorded. And that's a burden and a boon at the same time, right? At the same time not being recorded. I was thinking, I forget the guy's name, Hiawatha's friend, like the Iroquois chieftain. Yeah. I think Hiawatha was the guy who had the stutter, possibly. Do you know about the Iroquois?
Montezuma?
No. So...
I recognize the name Hiawatha and Montezuma.
Hiawatha was the guy that united the Iroquois tribes.
Yeah.
So Montezuma is the first king of Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah. So Hiawatha and his... I think it was Hiawatha who had the stutter.
Yeah.
He was a terrible speaker, but he was like a genius political mind beyond that. His friend was a super good speaker, good-looking guy, got along with everyone. And so he did a kind of Cyrano's thing where he'd tell his friend, like, hey, tell them this. And
Same thing with Moses and his brother.
Yeah.
Like, we all remember Moses now.
Yeah.
But he didn't actually do...
Back in the day, it was Moses' brother that was like...
Even... What would happen is God would give Moses powers, and then Moses would give his brother powers, and Moses' brother would do the miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, so Hiawatha... it was the same sort of thing where he would tell his friend, like, hey, do this. And his friend would do it, and then all the tribes got united. Yeah. And it could have been... You know, we know about Hiawatha and his friend. Yeah. But there could be some king, like King Alfred, for example. Yeah. Maybe he was the front man to, like, his best friend who was some sort of super genius politician, right? Like, there's probably people throughout history who's like that. And women often were that person. Yeah. But my problem with Nietzsche's view on women is I am more inclined to Jung's view on women. And Jung talks about the stages of men understanding women. And...
It's like the stages of grief.
Not really, no. I mean, you could say that you lose a bit of mystery along the way. But he calls them... I always forget. It's Helen... so it's Eve, Helen, Mary, Sophia.
Isn't prophet woman that no one listened to in there as well?
Cassandra?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, so the idea is that Eve is this... Women are these sensual objects that you look at and they're like, whoa, this is just a woman over there, right? And then you get to Helen, and okay, no, women are actual human beings, right? Yeah. But they're these unknowable, mysterious, different from humans you'll never understand.
Helena of Troy.
Yeah, like Helena of Troy. These beautiful creatures that maybe you can get to be your wife or something. But then Mary, it's like, okay, no, women are equal to men in every respect, but they have women's ways and men have men's ways, which is what Nietzsche talks about women as, right? He's like, women are equals to men, equal but different, right? Yeah. But then Jung has a final step, which is Sophia, which is you realize men and women are they are both human beings looking for the same things. They both have this sense of morality, and I'm more inclined to Jung. I think there is going to be like women like there's a thing that it's weirdly it ties into women and men being different, which is that if you ever see a esports player or a D&D map maker or a programmer who's the top of their game, and they're a woman, like they're the best in the business, or a director who's like the most amazing director and it's a woman, they're like 95% of the time they're trans, right? Like the only example I can think of someone who isn't trans supposedly is Empress. Like she is supposedly a biological woman, and she is the top hacker for video game hacker out there, and she's supposedly actually a woman, but a lot of people think she's trans. because of this same phenomena, right? Like she has said, no, I'm not trans. I'm definitely not trans. But people are like, yeah, but you're like the best. You're the best hacker out there. Why is the best hacker a woman? Right? The fact that people are doubting that the best hacker on Earth could be a woman, I think says something about how sexist they are, and they need to be taught.
There is that whole thing of there is that league team which was promoted for being a peer woman team.
Yeah.
There was 3 trans.
Yeah.
Women, and then there was actual team that was all women that tried to get into a league tournament, and they got destroyed by the competition. They couldn't really compete.
And I wonder if like that says something about the difference between men and women, right?
Well, so I think
because it's weird that trans women have male interests.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying skill, right? It's interest, right? Like I think that men and women probably have the same potential for most things. Not in all things, because women have slower reaction time, which is huge in like video games especially. And men don't have the same steady hands, which is huge if you're doing precision sports, right? So there is a difference, but I think for the most part it's down to interest. But it seems like trans women are interested in male topics, which makes me think that first of all, trans people are probably what did I say? Trans people are probably their own sex with a belief that they are the wrong sex rather than the wrong body with that like a female brain or something, right? Like I don't. Because they act like men, like trans women act like men. Not all of them, but they do to a degree. I think to a high degree, like more than like you look at people with complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. Yeah, which is they have XY chromosomes, but they have no ability to adopt testosterone whatsoever. Yeah, they follow like all the stats for women like identically, but trans women don't. So there's something going on there, I think. But
there's this phenomena you've known about some things has happened, and you're on just but it usually originates on Twitter. I think it's an excellent insight into both male and feminine perspective. Things like the bear thing, the Roman Empire. Yeah. One of them, but like whenever one of these pops up, it's very interesting to read both women's and men's side of things. Like one of the ones recently was a woman said, I recently found out that my husband often thinks about like standing against a horde of people and fending them off while his loved ones escape and dying bravely. Or he like thinks about dying bravely in various different ways. Yeah. And she couldn't comprehend this. And like the comments on both sides of like the women saying, oh yeah, I've noticed my husband do this, or my son was like this.
And women also tend not to adapt outcast type things, whereas men almost always do. Right? So example, I don't think it's that men like video games more than women. Because you see now that women are actually playing video games more than men, apparently.
That stat is...
Well, it's based on, like, mobile games.
That stat is based on mobile games.
But mobile games are still games.
Deer actually disagrees on it. I have a great reason he disagrees on it. He said, those are not video games, those are Skinner boxes. It's perfectly fine to play a Skinner box, but a Skinner box is not a video game. And I agree with him on that.
I think I think video games as a whole are, like, really degrading for the most part. And there are people on games I play begging for meta progression to be put into the game. Like, do you ever think Jesus just sometimes went like, why am I trying to help these people? You know, like, you ever just get there like, these people will not do a thing to help themselves.
Did the game have reverse meta progression? The Hulk game?
The Hulk game? What, like you got weaker as?
Yeah. Well, and people didn't know about it.
That's interesting. I don't know.
I think a reverse meta progression could be interesting because you get better at the game.
Well, like Hand of God, Fist of God, or whatever that game I showed you, sort of does. Like the game gets harder the better you do at it, which is sort of the same idea. But what was I talking about? Video, right. So let's say women play more video games, right? Like maybe they're Skinner boxes, but most video games are Skinner boxes at this point. So, but I don't think it was ever video games that women were repulsed by. It was that it was deviant. Yeah. But men aren't afraid of deviant behavior. Like, men are happy to build train sets under their house or watch anime or... Yeah. Like, they do it first. Men are the front... And then women... Now, this doesn't mean men are better or women are worse or women are... Because women, they stand back and they get to be the ones that say, that's bad. That's good. That's bad. That's good. Right? Like, the women are the ones that... The people with taste. Yeah. They're the ones that say, yeah, try everything. And then we're going to say... no, I don't think you should eat feces. That was maybe it was worth trying, but no, definitely not. Like they're the ones that actually have the sensibility, right? And I think it does seem like, and now I Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. The difference within the group is greater than the difference between the groups, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to find a huge variety of men, and they're going to actually overlap more with women than they're going to be the same. But I think that there's still
Warhammer.
There's still
tabletop war game.
There's still
like so this is actually interesting. Is a lot of women are getting into the video games of Warhammer. They're getting into the lore, the story, the idea of Warhammer. You ask any tabletop war gamer who goes to a store to play Warhammer or any tabletop war game, are there women going to the store? They'll say no.
Well, I've noticed there's a genre on YouTube of women learning about Warhammer lore.
Yeah.
The fact that that's a genre means something, right? That means that men are fascinated by a woman taking an interest in Warhammer. It doesn't mean she's adding anything to it.
Yeah.
Like Tom and Ben, or The Emperor Has Text-to-Speech, or the guy that did that animation.
Tom and Ben have done more for Warhammer lore than all the back.
But all these people, they are creating something, right?
Yeah.
That's why people watch them. They're like, this is really interesting. But it is so unusual that women are creating this completely alien thing simply by watching Warhammer lore. It's like, I need to see this. I need to see a woman actually react to this other world. It's like, it's a unicorn.
Yeah.
Right? And so that will disappear. In like 10, 20 years, that'll disappear. It used to be like my age and a little bit yours, I think, Stu. Gamer girls were like these unicorns. It was like actual gamer girls. Not women that played
not pick-me's.
And not ones that played a little bit of Mario Kart with their brother, but like girls that actually were into video games.
Yeah.
Like my age, in my peer group, I know of one person like that.
Yeah.
And you had more, I think, but well, you had less women in general in your age, actually. But
there's only one that I knew
of
growing up. Like now, I know 3.
So
like I know of 3 who actually play video games or are gamer girls.
Yeah, so pretty rare.
Yeah,
yeah. And actually, now I know like that I've met in person and know here. I know like 2, and online. Well, I think most women it's kind of a distorted view because most women online are gamer girls, like real ones. But the problem with that is that so they think, oh yeah, I'm not different because everyone's like this. But it's like, no, you're the exception. But because this is the place where information is transmitted, it seems like it's common.
Yeah.
But it's not. Like I was talking to someone recently who's 22, like a female, and I was saying, oh yeah, do you play Minecraft or whatever? You know, like most popular game on earth. And she's like, no, because I'm a girl.
Yeah.
Like a 22-year-old is still saying that sort of thing, right? Like, no, because I'm a girl, and it's like it's still a thing that is almost all for men, right? Yeah. Yeah. Even though online experience might suggest otherwise. Mm-hmm. Also, we live on the fringes of civilization, so we're going to be a little bit different in that sense. We're going to be like behind like 15 years culturally or 20 years behind or whatever. So there's going to be a bit of a difference there. But I think Nietzsche might be onto something in saying that women and men are different, but I'm not sure we know in what ways we're different and in what ways we should do something about that. Like, for instance, should women be allowed to vote? Like it's kind of a question of where are men and women equal, right? Like, should women be allowed to be writers? It's like, I think women are some of the best writers out there.
Social experiment, right?
Yeah.
So, federally, so the biggest form of government, men vote.
Yeah.
State-wise, so like your governor or your premier or whatever, men and women vote.
Yeah.
City-wise, municipality, town council, women vote.
I
wonder what would happen.
You'd end up with every city being like Chicago. Or like Detroit. It'd just be gang violence everywhere. Because the problem with women is they care about others, right? Like, you look at the stats on, like, you saw those Swedish stats, right? Where it's like women overwhelmingly vote socialist in Sweden.
Do you know what's really interesting, actually, on that?
Although married women vote like men, which is...
Well, no, this is why it's so interesting. On the married women. It's not married women vote like men. I was like, might be explained. It's married women with children vote like men. Mm. And what it is, I have this theory, so this might not be true, but it's just a theory, is that women care about everyone until they have children.
Then they care about their kids.
Then they care about their kids. And they will care about their husband.
Yeah.
Because they love them. But women really care about their kids.
That's interesting. I like that idea.
And so they will vote for and favor of the kids. Like, there's this weird thing where there's this like youngish mother I've been interacting with.
Yeah.
And she's a single mom with a kid.
Yeah.
And I've had like conversations with her, and she will push back on things and disagree with me, and she's very liberal in a lot of her ideas.
Yeah.
And I would talk about like the maybe a little overzealously like the problems that young men have today, like from my perspective of things. And then like we will talk again in like 5 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And her view, like she goes and researches these things that I talk about and actually looks at them. And it's because she has a young son.
Right.
And so she's like, oh, this is what a young man's dealing with right now.
You need to be ready for it.
Like, how can I help my son with this?
Yeah.
And it's kind of this interesting thing.
Yeah, I wonder if... So what if we made it so only married women with children could... or, you know, we could make it fair. We could say you have to have children to be able to vote, like man or woman.
Dan had this... So this guy does a show called Brokenomics.
Yeah.
He's one of the better of the podcast celebrities or presenters.
I don't know. I saw he did something on like the moon landing, and I was like, this guy's crazy.
He is. So he had this very interesting idea. So he was talking about,
and it's not because I think moon landing conspiracy theories are crazy. By the way, it's that the things that he's hung up on are so weak. Like,
yeah. He has his problems.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but he has some other things that are very interesting. So his one thing that he talked about, which I thought was like one of the most fascinating things, is so at the end of World War II. The British government decided they wanted to do something for the British people.
Yeah.
So they created the NHS.
Yeah.
To base, like, people are poor generally, but the government had money. The people are poor, the government wasn't.
Yeah.
So they made the NHS to basically fund healthcare for people. Now...
We have all this income tax. What should we do?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, we don't want to give it back.
Yeah.
So let's make more government.
Basically. So what's interesting about healthcare is old people use it.
Yeah.
Old people have money already.
Right.
And so it saves old people money to use healthcare.
And it takes it from the young.
It partly takes from, yeah. So he said, here's an idea. Instead, he didn't believe in this. This is alternative. Instead of doing income tax, what they do is they put all the money that could go, like the video was partly on NHS spending, which is absurd.
Yeah.
You take that money and instead you build houses with it.
Yeah.
And you're just building as many houses as you can. And we're going to ignore the limited amount of land space in the UK for this experiment. But so when you are 22 and you're married, so you have to be 22 and you have to get married. You have to be 20, you have to be married.
Yeah.
Then you're given a house. You're given a 2-bedroom house to live in. And you're given it for free.
Yeah.
Like, it is your house. Maybe there's proper taxes or whatever, but that's your house. And we don't have an NHS. And so... when people progress through life, they have more kids, they'll buy a higher end house.
Yeah.
And they will move on. And then the older people who as you get older, you need to pay for healthcare. And there's no healthcare service. So you sell your house, you move into a bungalow because it's just you and your wife, and you can pay for your healthcare with what you sold. And then it gives these bigger houses to the younger families who are building their families and moving up. Now, what would this cause society? Well, you have to be married. Yeah. So young women would look for men to marry.
Yeah,
because then you get a house.
Yeah.
Because men, no matter what you do, men are going to try to get married. They're trying to please women.
Yeah.
Like, a huge amount of history, inventions, technology is because of men trying to make women happy.
Yeah.
And so...
well, I wonder sometimes. Like, I think that the creative spirit expresses itself, right? Like,
yeah.
You can't not do some of that stuff.
No, that is true as well. That is true. But part of it is, like, men will try very well.
Like, look at Elon Musk, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's talked about before, like, how much time do you have to devote a week to a wife? Like, 15 hours a week, 10 hours a week? Like, I think he would be doing what he was doing without a wife, right?
Yeah, so... well, he's not married right now.
Yeah, well, he's gone through a lot of wives as well.
Yeah.
So I think that says something as well about...
yeah, but men will try to get married. That's just...
yeah.
And so women would, like, oh, if I marry a man, I can get a house.
Yeah.
And so you're going to try to look for someone to marry.
Yeah. But wouldn't that encourage, like, people to marry without... well, maybe that's not a bad thing.
It would lower the standard.
Yeah, but you'd just be like, I want a house more than I want anything. I'm just going to marry whoever. Like, the first person that comes along.
Yeah, well, it's not going to cause the problem of the woman waiting for Chad Thundercock. They'll just marry Steve.
Would it make... like...
it's like, they like Steve. Don't get, like...
have you heard that idea that, like...
like, Stacy and Steve
yeah.
like each other. They would get married. They'd have a happy marriage. It's just Stacy thinks that she'd have a better time with Chad. and so she doesn't marry him. But Chad has 20 Stacys, and so he's not going to commit to any of them. That's the psychological problem explained by incel.
Do you think that, like, there's this, people don't want to work anymore. You hear that bandied about, and one of the common counter arguments to, which I think is true, is that if you pay enough, people will do anything.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, people don't want to fill in potholes anymore. It's like, if you pay people $1 million a pothole, they'd be lining up for miles, right, to fill in a pothole. You might not get the same person every day because they're like, I got $1 million, I'm done. But you'd have people every single day coming to fill in a pothole, right? So, if you...
I'm not gay, but $20 is $20.
Well, like, if you see a woman, and she's like, okay, but she's a free house, like, does that make her look a bit more attractive? Like,
yeah.
You're just like, I know someone...
Look, if I was in the situation where... Now, some people may say, oh, this is emasculating. But if I was in a situation where there's a woman maybe a little bit older than me, she has a house, she's going to get paid more than me.
Yeah.
But, whatever reason, she loved me.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I would marry her.
See, I know someone like that, who's single, who has their own house, who's fairly wealthy. She's a little bit older than me. She lives in San Francisco. So, that's a big downer.
Yeah.
But, like, is that a person I should be pursuing? Like is that... Because, like...
I think there does have to be love, but a part of love is the help.
Well, because I think she's likable, this person, right? Like, I don't know her well at all, but...
One of the things...
The 1 or 2 times we've interacted, it's like, she's decent enough, we get along.
One of the things with Jordan Peterson talking about marriage...
Yeah.
I think it's a very important thing in marriage that people kind of... Like, you try to find the one, you try to find your soulmate or whatever.
Yeah.
You keep on loving the person. You don't get married and then that's that.
Yeah.
You keep on loving the person. You keep working on your relationship. You keep...
But once I get my house, like, they're no longer worth a house, right? Because I have a house now. I don't need another house. So it's kind of like...
Yeah, well, if it's just the house... Well, you have to stay with them to keep the house.
Like, I knew someone growing up when I was about 15 who... She was pretty attractive. She was... She was interested in video games, sort of, actually, come to think of it, which is unusual.
Look, what I'm saying is if there's a sugar mummy out there...
Please comment on that below.
Now, that being said, though...
We have, 80 subscribers now?
100.
100. So what are
the last video got us 5 with that meme image I posted.
Oh, wow. So, woohoo! So, that's not bad odds. Yeah. What are the odds of a sugar mummy? 1 in 100? 1 in 1,000? What?
That being said, I think one of the important things which... I
know 3 rich women online. And how many people do I know online? Maybe 100? So I think the odds are good.
So, being said, I think one of the pitfalls, which is where the sugar mummy relationship falls apart, is the man stops working.
Yeah.
No, you have to keep working, even if it's part-time, or even do what Pyrian does of he does YouTube full-time stuff, but it's you actually have to be a human.
One of the sugar mummies I know.
But no, this is important. If someone's in this situation, where you've gotten in the rare situation where you're a trophy husband.
Yeah.
I know a guy who calls himself a trophy husband and people joke about it.
Yeah.
But if you're in the rare situation where you're a trophy husband or your wife's richer, older than you, does all stuff.
Yeah.
You have to keep being a human being. You have to work. Even if you're the stay-at-home dad, you're not just the stay-at-home dad. You're not just, I take care of the kids or whatever.
Well, even if at least you're taking care of the kids, right?
Well, no, but I mean, you're taking care of the kids, you're stay-at-home dad, but you also go play Warhammer with your friend.
You have something.
You have to be a human.
Right. Well, that's
when people say, "Oh, this relationship type doesn't work," and it breaks down, all the situations where I look at them and hear the story, the husband wasn't a human.
Yeah.
He was a neat.
He was a Welch
who found a mother.
Yeah.
An actual mother. He wasn't her husband. He was her son.
Well, that's the one of the sugar mummies I know. I was saying, she said, "I'm happy to pay for all of my husband's stuff, as long as he follows his passions."
Yeah.
He has to be working on his passions. It doesn't have to make him any money, but he has to, if he's if he's a musician, he has to be making music, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if he's not making any money off of it, I'm totally fine with that, but he has to actually be doing that.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I think... That's probably not the way to phrase it. I know a very rich woman. Like, one of the richest women in the States. Like, I don't know her well, but, you know, it's like...
Yeah.
But I've talked to her a few times, and that's... yeah. So... That's what she said.
So what's her number?
She's in a relationship.
Uh-huh. You think that's an obstacle? No.
I will kill that. What's I saw it. There's like some young historical YouTubers. Like there's What If Altus. I don't know if you've seen him.
No.
Then there's Aristocracy is the other one I've seen, and she's like she's from Ontario, I think. So she's Canadian, and women interested in history. That's like the most attractive. Like on my tier list, you know, I made that the most attractive thing about a woman, right?
Yeah.
So number 1, still looks. Number 2, probably still singing. But number 3, history. Interest in history. I think history. Actually, I might put history above singing.
So you want a wife from a conservatory?
What, like a conservatory of music, you mean? Or like...
That's what conservatories used to always just be music.
Right. Well, I like history, but like not music history. That's lame.
Yeah, I guess.
Like war. Like geopolitics. Do you think... Okay, so now that you've heard... I don't know if you knew about Empress before I told you about her, right?
Yeah.
So I've told you she's like the best game cracker on Earth.
Yeah.
So now, is your thought immediately thinking fake, autistic, like...
My initial thought when you're saying that made me reflect on one of the best HEMA fighters in the world.
Yeah.
So this was back when HEMA was just starting as a sport. This wasn't even Bohertz. This was HEMA.
Yeah. This is knights in armor with swords.
Yes.
Yeah.
So HEMA is historical martial arts. It's you tap someone, you get points.
Yeah.
Like various different hints, counts for things, no excessive force. And one of the best HEMA fighters in the world was a woman.
Yeah.
And some people called her the best. Now there's criticisms of her that she only fought fights she could win. And she didn't participate in certain tournaments. She wanted to accept certain duels.
Right.
So it was she had like a 95% like tournament win rate or whatever.
Right.
But it was always in very controlled situations and...
You could say the same about Musashi.
Yeah. Musashi accepted every duel that came his way.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I thought he was like kind of pick your environment. And...
No, he was, that's it, warfare.
Yeah.
You have to think about the meta Musashi. Is pick your environment so you can win.
Yeah.
He knew he could be challenged anywhere.
Right.
So he lived his life picking his environment to be to his advantage.
Okay, so here's a situation, right? Like, so Musashi is now the 3rd member of our podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so imagine you're attacked by like a wolf and you're in your bathtub, right? Like, do you think you could win? And you and me are like, no, I don't think so. And Musashi's like, yeah, I'd win. Like, what? No, you're naked in your bathtub and a wolf, like a giant gray wolf, attacks you. He's like, yeah, easy. It's like, what? I just stab it. With what? With one of my swords. What? Yeah, you're taking a bath, right? You got your sword, don't you?
Yeah, no, that was Musashi.
Yeah. So I guess that is like, he was kind of paranoid in the sense that he was setting up the situation as well, right?
I don't know if it was paranoia or just acceptance of reality.
Yeah.
Like, paranoia is when it's a problem.
Yeah.
He was just prepared.
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, everyone's gonna... What's that Far Side? It's like, so you beat me at the spoons, kid. Now everyone with a spoon is going to come after you and they're going to want to challenge you. Welcome to hell.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like the Legend of Musashi.
Yeah. It's classic Western trope. Yeah. Did you see that Netflix show, that the cowboy thing? The Ballad of Buster Scruggs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like him. You know,
yeah.
There's always a better guy that comes along.
Yeah, there's always a faster gun. A quicker draw.
Although Musashi didn't ever lose, did he?
He lost once.
Oh, did he?
To a farmer with a stick.
Oh. Well, he didn't die, though.
No.
Like, he died young, though, didn't he? Like, he got sick or something?
No.
No?
He died in his 70s.
Oh. I mean, that's
70s or 60s.
That's not that old.
Yeah. No, he got sick and then died in a cave.
Was he a Ronin? I mean, technically?
No. He... So a Ronin is a masterless samurai who fights without having a master and goes to war, so they're basically a mercenary.
Right.
He was constantly looking for a master, and he did duels and he participated in wars, but it was sort of thing of he would be a samurai for the battle.
I'm technically Ronin, but I'm really just between masters.
That was basically what he was.
Right.
And he got a master in later life. He didn't want to be a samurai, though. Musashi wanted to be a strategist. He tried really hard to be a strategist. and no one ever hired him. And so he got a retainer in later life who had him as an advisor, but still not as a strategist. And then he had his adopted son, who some people say was also his boy. But because people like, he never took a wife, he wasn't interested in women, and then he had like 3 adopted sons.
Right. And everyone in history was a gay pedophile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every last one. And incestuous if it's an adopted son.
Yeah. And if it was their best friend...
Yeah. Nobody ever had a friend.
Who they got buried with. Yeah.
Yeah. The only person... Now that's funny, because the only person who's gay in history that I agree with... Historians don't say it was gay. But I think Augustus Caesar was probably gay. Like, have you ever... I've showed you his quotes on women, right? He's like, women are the most repugnant creatures on earth. The most lamentable thing about them is we can't do without them. Like...
Is he the guy who said, women are for children, men are for love?
I don't think so.
That is like a Roman quote or something people say about Rome.
That might be kind of gay too. Well, it's different.
No, it's not gay. Yeah. No, see, gay is if you're enjoying it.
Right.
It's not gay if you don't enjoy it. That is actually the Roman perspective.
Yeah, but you got.
That's pretty gay.
You know, sometimes you can't find the love you need from your wife, but you need to reach out to people that understand you best.
There's a great... Have you seen Van Helsing Abridged?
No.
It's done by the same sort of some of the people who did Dragon Ball Abridged.
Yeah.
So one of the parts is part of the group of Christians. There's this nun, and she's very obviously a lesbian in the anime.
Yeah.
And so in the bridge, one of a priest said, God said that no man can lie with no woman can lie with a woman as they would another woman as they would with a man.
Yeah.
And she says, exactly, I lie with women as if they're women. And then the priest's like, oh, well then, I have some people to talk to.
Oh, loophole. Well, that was one of the things. Nietzsche is really interesting. So Jordan Peterson. Can we wrap up with this little because I gotta get going. But Jordan Peterson talks about Nietzsche with in The Gay Science. There's that fool character, the madman who says like God is dead, we have killed him, we'll never wash the blood from our hands.
Yeah.
And that is a character in the story. Like Nietzsche is saying this is what the madman says, right?
Yeah.
But Nietzsche himself says with God dead, then we can forge forward and find our own destiny. We can choose our own morality. We
must be God's ourselves.
Yeah. And our own will be our driving force leading us forward.
Yeah.
Which, it's Nietzsche, he talks about things that sound negative in a positive sense and things that are positive in a negative sense. So it's hard to say if he's actually happy or not about that event. Because, like I said in Beyond Good and Evil, he's saying things like deceitful and honesty in the opposite terms. He's like, honesty is bad and just like, it's all to what event they happen.
Yeah.
And when he talks about... So he says German literature is all terrible. Like, nobody knows how to do pacing, because literature is meant to be read out loud. You're not meant to be reading silently in your head. You're meant to be speaking out loud. And if the sentence doesn't have any rhythm, then you'll stumble over the words. You can't read it out loud properly. You have to have it so that you can actually pause at proper times and exaggerate words. And so he writes in a really weird style. There's also dashes and periods and exclamation marks everywhere. He just randomly will say, what? In the middle of a sentence. Like you can imagine a German professor like, was?
Yeah.
Like, because it's German, right? But so he just does that randomly in his sentences. It's meant to be read out loud while you're, read out loud to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, he said that's how literature should be read. And Germans, none of them do it. He said the only piece of German literature is the Bible. Because Luther wrote the first non-Latin Bible, right? Well, besides the Hebrew and the first translation of the Latin Bible. Luther actually cared about making it, good for people to read and interesting.
Yeah.
So Luther is the only true German author,
Yeah, there's great parts in the Bible where Jesus admonishes us, like, "Oh, ye of little faith," and if you're a proselytizer, you can be reading the story of Jesus getting saved, and you can put the book down, stare at your congregation, and admonish them.
But you can read to yourself, right? Out loud to yourself. And so,
no, it's when I listen to the Bible on audiobook, I'm slowly getting through it. And every once in a while, he's a good narrator. It's got a very resonant, deep voice. Every once in a while, I feel like he's scolding me because he's quoting someone who's scolding someone else.
But I think Nietzsche and Jordan Peterson are actually opposite people. I don't think they're the same. And I don't know if Jordan Peterson is right to say that they're aligned with each other. But I think Jordan Peterson
is the anti-Nietzsche.
Sort of, I don't think Jordan Peterson believes in God, but I think he's a theist. I think Nietzsche is an atheist who believes in God. Because Nietzsche talks about God all the time and all his virtues and whatnot, but he's an atheist, right? So I think Nietzsche believes in God, but I think Nietzsche is an atheist. And I think Jordan Peterson doesn't believe in God, but I think Jordan Peterson is a theist.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're opposites.
No, I think I don't think that's opposites actually. Because like with Sargon, he's atheist.
Yeah.
But he believes in the spirit.
Yeah. Which I think is like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. I think that even though Nietzsche is a theist, so
I said he's an atheist who believes in God.
Yeah, believes in God.
Yeah.
Like from what I haven't read his books, obviously.
Yeah.
But what he's saying, like he's talking about men, talking about women, like talking about these virtues. He very much believes in the spirit of things.
Yeah. No, he believes things should be according to their nature. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a true atheist. I think is like Dawkins.
Yeah.
Dawkins can't see the forest. He literally can't see the forest. He has to look at everything and examine them as they are.
Yeah.
There is no fairies.
Yeah.
In Dawkins' life. Like he talked about even how what's his name? Father of evolution. Darwin.
Yeah.
Darwin believed in fairies because two of his younger cousins took photographs of themselves and things, and they had cutouts of fairies that they pinned to things, and they had belly buttons because those were the pins, but he thought they were real fairies, and so Darwin believed in fairies because of these photos. But Darwin couldn't understand like certain species of wasps because of how nasty they were. It's like, this can't be a God-given design.
Yeah.
But Darwin was deeply Christian, and so his life conflicted him, but he still believed in the spirit of God.
Yeah.
And so I think a true atheist is not someone who doesn't believe in God. A true atheist is someone who doesn't believe. They need the scientific method. They need reality.
But I think like the question becomes, and this is what Jordan Peterson tried to ask Dawkins, the question kind of becomes,
what do you believe in?
No, why do you need the scientific method? Like, why are you pursuing truth?
Yeah.
Like, why not pursue... Nietzsche starts Beyond Good and Evil with this. Why pursue truth? Why not pursue untruth? Why not try to deceive yourself? Why not try to... Like, and these are questions... Nietzsche isn't being rhetorical. He's actually asking, like, wouldn't it be better if we deceived ourselves and that made us happy and strong and healthy? And, like, if deception brought us that far, would that not be better than knowing the truth that is horrible and destroys us?
We have to go all the way back to the Greeks with, what's his name?
Plato?
No, Plato's teacher.
Socrates.
Yeah. Socrates' demon.
Yeah, that just tells you how to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Plato actually really likes Socrates, and he thinks Plato is terrible. And he thinks that Plato was an amazing writer who did everything he could to try to warp Socrates' views to fit his own view of the world.
Yeah, well, I know people say that Nietzsche destroys Kant.
Yeah.
I disagree. Even though I haven't read Nietzsche, I disagree. Because Kant had Socrates' demon.
Yeah.
Kant was justifying... what Kant did is he came up with a justification of the demon.
Well, no, so Nietzsche would have Socrates' demon, but Kant actually said the only good thing is the will to do good. Yeah. Kant didn't actually know what was good or not.
Yeah.
He was doing his best, right?
Yeah.
But Nietzsche is saying, no, you can know what is good.
Yeah.
You can just... So I'd say Nietzsche is actually closer to Socrates than Kant was.
But Kant was trying to figure out what good was.
Yeah.
And he did a very German thing of...
Well, Nietzsche...
breaking down what good was.
Nietzsche just goes after Kant so much in the book, but he actually does say to Kant...
If you hate someone, there's a reason for it.
Well, like, I don't think he hates him exactly. He's like...
Well, Jordan Peterson has the line that... I forgot his name. It's just in my mind. Father of Philosophy was great.
Socrates?
No, sorry. Psychology.
Freud?
Freud was great. That's why people hate him.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, people are like, oh, no, Freud, that's all Freudian. That's like...
Yeah.
It's like, Freud had some points.
No, like, when I first learned about Freud, I was like, oh, this stuff's super outdated. The more I learn about psychology and the more I learn about life, it's like, Freud was a genius.
Yeah.
Like,
No, Freud was great. That's why people hate him.
But when he's talking about, like, the French, he talks about all their philosophers. And he does say about Kant, he's like, Kant was one of the only German philosophers who could actually go toe-to-toe with the French, and he was trying to answer them.
Yeah.
But he doesn't think he succeeded. He was... So he thinks Mozart was the last true musician. He thinks like Wagner and everyone after that, they're just copying the French. But he's like, Beethoven Beethoven was actually creative. He was the middle between the dying of the old and the coming of the new. And then Mozart was the last great musician. And now music these days, it's terrible. Everyone just listens to this music that's designed to appeal to the lowest common denominator.
Man, he had severe juvenoia.
It's so funny. He's like these woke kids and their music that doesn't have any meaning. And
on final note on that. So there's a guy who said, we're in cultural stagnation.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know if you watched Back to the Future.
No.
There's a part in Back to the Future where the guy goes back in time.
Yeah.
And he plays Johnny Be Good. And it blows everyone's mind because music they've never heard before.
Yeah.
It is beyond their premise. It's like a cultural change, cultural advancement. And he's saying, if we were to go back in time the same amount of time, like from now, that they went back in time in that, we would have no music that could blow people's minds. Yeah. And it's like, you look at our culture hasn't moved, our culture hasn't changed. I was watching some music videos of 2000s and some videos and stuff from the 2000s and like their fashion, the things they did, the way they are. It is so different. It is, I think his problem is he's an old man who's like, oh, that's just kids' fashion, so he can't reflect to it. But me looking at it, it's like, you look at this, like the 2000s, even up to 2009, I think, was so different than now. Even the difference between 2018 to 2025, like fashion-wise, culture-wise, art-wise, music-wise, there's differences I can point out.
Yeah, no, I think lyrics nowadays actually kind of suck. I was listening to some Shania Twain yesterday, and her songwriting is so much better than modern music. Yeah. But modern music, the composition is phenomenal. Like that alone would blow people's minds in the past. Like it is unbelievable what they can do.
Also, there's in the individuals, such as the guy's song "Chalk Outlines."
Yeah, Ren. Yeah, no, they're
you could categorize Ren as very similar to Chalk Outlines is very similar to Crawling in My Skin.
Yeah.
No, they're actually very different stories, very different messages. The music's very different. It does answer the same need in some ways. And they're both emo. Yeah. But that is 2005 emo versus 2020 emo.
Yeah, well, I think Chalk Outlines is more like hip-hop or something.
Yeah.
No, emo's
no,
okay.
I used to not like emo.
Yeah, no, it's been growing on me too.
But even the concept of emo. Yeah. But now that I actually know what emo is your spirit crying out for help. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to be emo. But yeah, it's things move and things change, and I think we're in a very different place than where we were.
Well, I gotta go. So that's a good one to end on. Yeah. All right.
There's a new world.